That's, oh, look at that. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, folks. I'd like to call the March 21st, 2023 Select Board meeting to order. Tonight, on our agenda, we have many reports that are going to take place. We'll start out with public comment, followed by our liaison and town manager reports. The first presentation is from a consultant that the town has hired that's going to give us a presentation on fiscal 24 water and sewer rates. That's at about 7:30. 8 o'clock, we'll have a presentation from Recalc. At 8:30, a presentation from Ben Cares, our Economic Development Director, on the parking kiosk rollout. At 8:45, a presentation from the Town Forest Committee. At 9:15, the board's going to take a vote on Select Board Policy 1.6.8, which relates to declaring surplus property. Town meeting has approved the purchase of new handguns and ammunition, and the board needs to take a vote to declare the older material as surplus. 9:30, we'll discuss and vote on a select board member to join the Affordable Housing Trust Board, as well as a plan for advertising for additional members for that board. With the board's indulgence, I'd like to switch the agenda slightly in terms of the kind of order of operations. I'd like to suggest that after the Affordable Housing Trust, why don't we talk about future agendas, approve the meeting minutes, and then we'll make the 17 Harnden discussion our last item, which would allow us, that will be an executive session, and that would allow us to not return to open session in the evening. Is that okay with the fellow board members?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So let's plan on that. All right, so let's start with public comment. And are there people that are in the boardroom that would like to speak this evening?
Yes. Yes, there is.
Please, if you first person could raise your hand. Carla, if you could actually, or Karen, can you help me out here for a sec? Just call on people and ask them to come up and announce themselves.
Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah,
Excuse me, Dr.
I need to go up there. Sure. Here I go. Hey. So my name's Diana Cerna, and I live at 104 Sanborn Lane, which is part of that private road area on Sanborn Lane. And you guys have kind of been up to speed on this a little bit, but basically there's a really narrow part because it used to be a driveway, sort of right to the left of our driveway. And right there it gets super narrow and traffic just has to wait for one side to pass for another. There's also the Wood End School with kids walking back home from school, and there is no sidewalk. The road is not wide. It's really dangerous. We watch accidents kind of almost taking place in front of us. I have a 5-year-old who likes to ride her bike, and I would love to be able to walk our dog and not have it be such a level of unsafe. So what I would love to have happen is either a sidewalk that gets put in, particularly in that area. I mean, bonus points if we can get it to run down the whole street, but especially in that area, and that would go to where Sanborn starts to branch off again and become public, up into where they just put in that new development sort of across the way from me. So I think that's like 10, I don't know what is it,
In 103
3 Sanborn Lane now. So
Farmhouse Lane.
basically just running the span of 2 properties would be even just a good head start on just really taking away that super unsafe area. And being as we're a private way, I also understand that like this isn't typically something that the town would pay for, but in this particular case, we are the only private way in town that is also an access road to other roads. So we are not private in the sense that we are the only ones, us residents are the only ones who use the road, or we're not at the end of a cul-de-sac. So since we are an access point, it seems something that would at least be like, let's present it to the group here. Can we talk about getting it paid for by the town since it is so accessible and so publicly used? So,
Thanks.
Thanks, Diana.
I'm Diana's neighbor. Most of you know me. I'm Bruce McKenzie, 102 Sanborn. Former town meeting member and running again. I want to thank most of you for coming out and seeing Sanborn Lane at that narrow spot and realize that the only thing that slows the cars down is the pavement is really rough. And when it was smooth pavement, people would speed through there. Someday in the future, it'll get paved again, and then people will speed through there again. Let's see, I'm the principal, I'm the lead person in that citizens petition that became Article 24 and 25. I know those petitions are not worded as well as they should be. We'd like help. How can they better be worded? What better drawings are needed? Suggestions for finance, for funding it. So please, let's work together in the next month and improve those petitions. Another resident, not me, specifically, who can't be here, specifically asked that the select board vote and hopefully recommend those articles to town meeting. We know that articles don't have a good chance of passing unless they're recommended. So this may require being on the agenda. I'm happy to come back and talk about it. Article 25, Farmhouse Lane. I want to stress that one property owner got control of 3 acres and put 3 houses in the backyard with a beautiful new street and sidewalks, and they come out and the sidewalk leads to nowhere. So at one point, that property owner could have said, we'll treat it all as 3 acres and we'll do the right thing. We'll connect the sidewalks to the school. So right now, there are 3 new houses. They're going for $2 million each. They're going to be new families moving in there. They're big houses. They'll probably have lots of kids. And they'll have this beautiful sidewalk where no one drives. And then this little gap for the kids. And they're paying a lot of property taxes. And basically, the subdivision wasn't finished. And they pulled strings and broke up the property so that CPDC didn't think they have the authority to put the sidewalk, to connect the sidewalks. I'm told that the town staff recommended in 3 different reports that those sidewalks be connected. But because the way the property boundaries were split before CPDC had a chance to work on it, they were stuck. So, okay. Article 20.
Can I ask you to wrap up in the next?
Yes.
10, 15 seconds?
Article 25 specifically says the town should acquire somehow some land to put a sidewalk in. And I know that'll be controversial, but Diana and I worked on the dates and we specifically said, start it before the next town meeting, but you don't have to, but I'm expecting there'll be revisions with the next November town meeting. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Also by finishing this subdivision, it sends a message to future developers and landowners to, think of the whole town, think of the whole neighborhood when you're making these plans. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm also happy to come down to town hall, and some of the other residents would too. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Any other members of the public that would like to speak this evening that are in the room right now?
I'll get your two later.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Brown, before you start, I apologize. I should have made sure to do a roll call to assure that we are all in the meeting. I know that 4 of you are there, so I'm going to do a quick roll call for remote participants. Mark Doxer, here. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. As we all know, we now have a neutral gender bathroom downstairs. And the way I read that, and I read the chapter on the accessible board, I think it has to be brought up, that bathrooms downstairs have to be brought up to ADA codes. Presently, a person in a wheelchair cannot get into any bathroom in this building. And I think it's deplorable when we're spending thousands of dollars to improve a park and we don't give a damn about anybody in a wheelchair. I was talking to our veterans agent just a few moments ago. He had a gentleman come in, he couldn't get in the building. Luckily, he had somebody with him, could open the door. And then he found out he couldn't get into the bathroom. I think that's deplorable. Now, we've had since this building was built and renovated before the ADA came in 1990. And talking to my expert consultant on it, I think we should bring this building up to code. And I'm going to suggest to you 30 days, let's have something. If you don't, I will in fact apply to the state and have them come out and look at it. I'd rather have you guys take care of it, get it done, at least make a progress. But if you do not, I will go to the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
And by the way, speaking of the previous speakers, they cannot have it unless they want to pay for it under the Betterment Act, as I did when I built my house. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any other members of the public in the select board who would like to speak?
I don't see any. Oh, no, I take that back. One more.
Oh, great. Thank you. Please come to the podium.
Hi, folks. Gennady Pilowski here, 3 Harriman Avenue. So last week, you folks were discussing having some incentives to bring additional members to boards and committees within the town to fill some of the vacancies that have been happening. We heard a recommendation for giving them gift cards. As a volunteer, I would say that I'm comfortable saying that we could skip that one. You're trying to attract individuals to these positions that are passionate about the topic and passionate about improving Reading. So I don't think that a monetary incentive is the right approach. If you're looking to recruit additional individuals, give the boards a forum to speak, give them a microphone. There's quite a few town events where we have public speakers. Bring boards that are somewhat related to the event. You have Forest Day, that's Trails, that's Environmental Committee, that's Conservation Committee. Give them the mic for 2-3 minutes. Let them introduce themselves to the community. Let them talk about the work that they do to the community, and let them directly recruit from the community, from the individuals that are at that event, because those are going to be like-minded individuals that just may not have full understanding that there are boards that they can volunteer for. And I also want the board to think about the optics of proposing monetary incentives to volunteers after we have DPW folks come in here and discuss that their salaries are significantly lower than the rest of the neighboring towns in hour between the two events. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. All right, so no one else in the room at this point who would like to speak?
No, I think that is correct.
Great, okay, we'll go to online. I see Marilyn has her hand raised. Marilyn, can you just introduce yourself, please, and then the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Marilyn Shapley. I'm the chair of the Council on Aging and live on John Carver Road. I just wanted to, I can't see who's in the room, Mark. This is a joint meeting. I only see John Parsons and myself and the participants. Do we have any other council members out there?
No.
You in council?
No? No, great. All right, then I don't need to call a roll. No problem. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other members, any other members of the public that would like to speak that are online at the moment? Okay, not seeing any. Okay, so let's roll on. Next topic for us is select board liaison and town manager reports. Carlo, I think you have a small announcement related to that. You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So, yes. So, yesterday was our town manager's birthday. So, which was on social media, and which was great. And we all pitched in, and I figured a cake would be, less COVID friendly. So we went local because there's no cake shops in town. So I got some cupcakes from Cupcake City. We'll partake in that at the break. Thank you. So happy birthday. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Sweet 16 and never been kissed, right?
That's right. That's right. Do you want me to just roll on with my updates? So you want to let?
Please, yeah, why don't you go ahead?
All right, so we had quite an eventful Recreation Committee meeting. And there's a few topics on the agenda. One was Reading softball wanted to put a home run fence over at Driscoll, and that was their second time. They couldn't make quorum a few meetings, unfortunately. So the season is starting in early April, so they really had a vote on this. And so they made the presentation, and the fence, which will be a permanent temporary fence, home run fence, meaning it will be there just for the season, and it will come down about mid-June. So that got approved. And then Jenna was gonna check with Fidel to see if we needed to vote on it, and I don't think we do because of the monetary amount. So that passed. And some other youth organizations spoke about field space over there and all that stuff, but the rec committee voted to approve that temporary fence, which I think I believe is also at Sturgis as well. And then the fun topic came on pickleball, and we had quite a filled room of Sturgis residents and Sturgis Park residents and Washington Park residents. And at the beginning of the meeting, Michael Coltman, who's on the board, and also created with other people, the Reading Pickleball Association nonprofit to raise money. Told them right at the beginning of the meeting that there was gonna be no pursuit by the pickleball community to multi-purpose Sturgis or Washington Park. And so that put them at ease because of the recent footage on Wellesley and the noise and parking. So there'll be no discussion, at least for this year, and probably for a long time, that there'll be no pickleball at Sturgis or Washington Park because they're too close to the residences. And Family Day in June from the Lions Club was approved on June 10th. So we look forward to that. And then Jenna talked about the Birch Meadow Master Plan Phase 1. And at that time, we were kind of in flux about maybe approaching it in 2 phases. And that's what Jenna kind of presented. And I just urged her to maybe hold off to try to, because, you know, it came over budget, as we all know, that project. So I told the committee and anyone in the room that, you know, Fidel was looking for the money and trying to get this phase 1 done all at once, not in 2 phases, because we know how that goes. So I'm hoping Fidel will share an update with that on his town manager report. And then I was a little late because the Ice Arena Board Authority had a board meeting this evening. That was pretty standard meeting, nothing really big to report other than just doing a few bylaw changes internally that they can have remote meetings so they can make quorum, you know, Zoom. And they want to add that. Brad Lathan wants to add that to the bylaws. So it's in there because it's currently not. And they also are going to propose a bylaw change to have a non-resident be on the board for the main reason is that if a hockey coach, which has to be a board member, doesn't live in the town, per their charter, hockey coach is a default position on the board. And currently, that's fine with Mark Doherty, but they want to just put that in there. And there is, part of that bylaw change is if a longstanding member leaves town and the board deems that they're worthy of remaining on the board, that would be allowed. So that was discussed. Operations, scheduling, everything's fine. There's a big ice show from the North Shore Skating Club. I took a picture of the flyer. I'll post that myself and I'll forward it to Jane. March 31st, it's a little early this year. It's March 31st, that weekend, first weekend in April at the Ice Arena. And they plan to get the roof done this summer. And that was it. And I had to leave early to get here. And I think, and then I was tasked, last thing, I was tasked with reaching out to MMA and inquire about other law firms that service municipalities. And there are 7. There's a lot of specialty law firms that specialize in litigation, but there's at least 7. There's probably some more, but there's at least 7 that specialize in municipal law. And one is very local. He services Wakefield and Linfield.
Excuse me, I'm a little concerned that this this needs to be an agenda item, and I don't want this board to get into trouble, but I'll defer to the chair.
I think that we asked for an update. We tasked Carlo with providing an update on what's going on. So if you can just kind of tell us where you are in the process, maybe that's the best way to do it. And then it sounds like we should schedule an agenda item when we get to future agendas to deal with this in more depth.
Okay, so there's, so far I found 7 firms.
Awesome.
And that's it.
All right, great, thanks. Chris?
Thanks, Mark. So what Carlo left off is that I brought cupcakes also for Carlo's 25th anniversary.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that, sorry.
So, yes, we're taking these from
You
Rachel.
only have half of them. You should take the other half off.
It's our 25th.
I picked the wrong time to get sick.
Yeah, it's our 25th that I'm here. So happy anniversary to Aaron. Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
You have anything? Any holidays or anything?
No.
And then the school committee met last week. The first day of school is going to be August 30th of this year. And then for preschool and kindergarten, it's a week later on September 5th. So I'm going to have my second kindergarten going to school, which is kind of crazy, but yeah, just seeing that starting and having a calendar approved for August now is, pretty good just to see. Also, RCTV had the candidate forum last week. So Bob was there. Bob did a great job. Alan Folds, moderator, Katie, Phil, everybody, a couple board members were there as well. So it's good to see RCTV just continuing with their great coverage and programming of things. So if people wanted to check it out, it's available online, multiple places. And I believe that's all I got. School committee, yep. That's it, Mark. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Karen?
Sure, thank you, Mark. So last Thursday night, I know a number of us attended Winterfest. Kudos, Fidel and staff. It was a great time again, well attended. Ben, you're there. Thank you very much. And after that, Friday night, I had the opportunity to go see the Parker Middle School's production of Little Mermaid Junior, which is just adorable. And it was good to be back in that historic theater. And so great job. I attended a FinCom meeting where we finished up the FY24 budget presentations with public safety, and the Finance Committee discussed what we've been discussing about Fidel's proposal to begin a process of thinking about standardizing on trash carts. And then there was also robust discussion about Birch Meadow Phase 1, and as Fidel has noted in his town manager meeting, a number of sources of potential makeup financing are available, and I'm happy to report that the Finance Committee is in general firmly committed to this project and finding a great solution to make sure that we can get it done. I attended the RMHS PTO, and I'm happy to report that travel programs are back after a hiatus during 3 years of COVID and travel difficulties. So they range from Habitat to Humanity to Spain to France and London, and it was really exciting. These are staff, educator-led programs, and I was ready to sign up for Habitat for Humanity myself. That sounded terrific. Last night we had, I think it was last night, we had I was also back at RMHS. I have been a board member on the Reading Scholarship Foundation for a number of years, and so RMHS sponsored a college night for 14 communities. I might be mixing that up with the robotics competition. It was a busy week. But that was extremely well attended. And so for those of you who don't know, and those of you who might be watching at home, the Reading Scholarship Foundation is only for Reading residents. But what is unique about, there's a few things that are unique. One of the things that's unique is it has a limited applications every year. They might range to maybe 200 applicants in a typical year. And the Scholarship Foundation routinely distributes $190,000. So anybody who's filled out scholarship applications knows those are really great odds. They are only for Reading residents and or folks who have attended Reading Memorial High School, or I think also Austin Prep. So you can see the website rsf.org for the specifics. But what's unique about it is that it is good for all years that you are an undergraduate, and it is an easy application to fill out. So next year's applications will open up sometime early December. They are online. Mark your calendars, and then mark your calendar for, January for the next 3 or 4 years so that you can take advantage of this terrific program. Okay, so then last night, the Killam School Building Committee met because we are now entering the owner's project management selection phase. So I thank you to Fidel and our procurement officer, Allison Jenkins, for laying out a timeline for getting this done. The school building administration wants to have some oversight and review of our selection before we proceed to the next phase. And then Fidel has us targeting a July date, I think, to have them approve it. And then we would move on to the next phase. So keeping this project moving right along. Today, I joined former school committee member Linda Doxer and Shirley Lestrade, an advisor at RMHS, and her group of students. And today was Metco Advocacy Day on the Hill at the State House. And, kudos to our educator, Ms. Lestrade. These kids, their eyes opened. They were in, Rep. Joan hosted the group and heard from the adults and the kids about the need for more funding for the Metco program and what it means to them and the challenges that they might have. Transportation was a key message. And then the group also was able to meet with Senator Lewis. And coming out of the Senator Lewis meeting, you could see the wheel spinning in at least one student's head about the fact that, wow, this is how we as students can begin to make change. They were in there, sharing with the legislators, this is why it's important to vote for this. So I'm happy to report that both Rep. Jones and Senator Lewis are in favor of the program and promised they would continue to fight for it in the upcoming session. And then I did get a voicemail message from Rep. Haggerty. Rep. Haggerty had a conflict today with the Ways and Means Committee meeting, but he also asked me to share that he is very much in favor of this program and be happy to entertain a conversation at a later date that he wasn't able to have today. So that was really great. I wanted to share, Fidel, I got a request from a resident. I know we've talked about more communication about the downtown construction. I just wanted to share that I got a request from a resident that this particular resident would love maybe some more use of that texting mechanism we have to basically just let people who sign up know, if there's a street to be avoided or a particular event coming up, they would love to get that text update. Stay away from Haven today, maybe avoid Lower Haven or whatever it is. So I just wanted to pass that along. And so since you're serving cupcakes, maybe you could also also have a bite and thank Chair Mark Doxer. Thank you for serving as Select Board Chair for another year. Anybody who's done this job knows how much work it is on top of the very robust workload we all have as Select Board members. So just thank you, I appreciate that. That's it.
Thanks, Karen. Jackie?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Attended FinCom actually the same week as our last select board meeting when we heard from a member of the public with concerns about DPW's staffing and hiring. And I was really impressed with Fidel's and Jane Kinsella's responsiveness on this. At the FinCom meeting back on the 9th, Jane gave some detailed information to explain the vacancies. And I think more recently, and maybe Fidel will talk about this during his report, it sounds like DPW has made some progress in filling those vacancies. I think to some of the things that we do here that are most important probably get the least amount of attention until something goes south, but keeping streets plowed, maintained, all of those good things are bread and butter of what we do. So I'm thankful for the staff's receptiveness and activity on recruitment in that department. I know we're going to talk in more detail about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but I attended a Mass Municipal Association webinar on the topic with a number of communities that have adopted one of these trust fund boards and committees. I think it's an issue that a lot of communities face. Affordable housing shortage isn't unique to Reading. One thing I noticed in the news over the past couple of weeks is that about 1/6 of the affordable housing projects in the state were financed by Silicon Valley Bank. And so, we look at that in the news and maybe think it's tech bros and it's Silicon Valley, but it, could have the potential to affect projects here in Reading. So I look forward to hearing more from our housing stakeholders about the impact of that on financing opportunities for affordable housing. Let's see, RMLD board last week authorized the general manager to award some bids for bill mailing, for grounds and landscaping, and for transformers. Also heard an update from RMLD's new integrated resource division manager. He's looking at things like reliability in terms of investments in infrastructure and data analytics, evaluating contracts, and also managing or maximizing non-carbon generation, including the recent signing of a contract for hydropower coming from Connecticut. Hydro will be 5% of our 2024 energy purchase. And because we're a municipal, or we have a municipal light plant, RMLD can sign longer contracts. In this case, the hydro contract is for 32 years. Just a couple more updates. I applied to participate in an MMA policy committee, and I was nominated to the Energy and Environment Committee, so I attended the first meeting. This month, the group meets monthly. There are cities, towns, staff, elected officials, and they look at policy issues in various subject matter areas. And so MMA staff gave us a bit of an update on the budget, the governor's budget as it goes through the legislature, what it means for cities and towns. So something called Chapter 90 is the main vehicle for state aid to municipalities. The governor's budget had $400 million in Chapter 90 aid. MMA estimates that even for transportation, cities and towns need $700 million. They said that Chapter 90 has lost 2/3 of its purchasing power in the last 10 years due to inflation. So obviously 400 and 700, there's a lot of real estate in between those two, but it sounds like there's, as there always is, negotiations at the legislature on that. And then just some save the dates coming up this week on Thursday, March 23rd at 3 p.m. The Board of Health is doing a virtual meeting on mosquito control Q&A. Also see some health-related events. I know we heard that as a goal from Fidel, and it looks like he's already at work doing that with town staff. There'll be a blood pressure clinic on the second Monday of each month from 2 to 5 at the Reading Public Library. Something very close to my heart, and I think a lot of people's families. The town hall will host a mammography clinic on April 12th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I can only speak for myself, but I know during COVID I let those yearly exams slip a little bit, but now's a great time to get them back. And just a couple more save the dates. The Juneteenth Festival, save the date, will be coming up on Saturday, June 24th, which I believe is also Porch Fest. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. So just a couple of updates here too. We neglected at our last meeting to talk about some of the celebrations surrounding Bill Russell's birthday, Bill Russell's legacy. So we did have, there were two events that were held at the library. One was a screening of a documentary, a two-part documentary that's available on Netflix, and that had a good number of people in attendance. And then there was a Cato conversation also that took place on March the 6th. And we should have brought this up at our last meeting. I actually was not able to attend that one, although I ended up meeting with a number of the people who had attended afterward and learned a lot about it. But I guess it was quite successful. A lot of very good conversations got started there. And remember, the board had made a commitment many, many years ago in terms of a Bill Russell Day, and we've talked about it ourselves. So that I think was, for this year, I think Cato kind of took the lead in terms of these activities. I just want to acknowledge their good work on that activity. Second, Recalc is making a presentation this evening, which really is the culmination of a lot of the work that's been done. And a lot of these meetings that Recalc has had have been done in conjunction and together with the Council on Aging. And tonight's presentation, I think you'll see that a lot of work has taken place. There's a lot of good momentum in talking about what the needs are that we want to pursue, how important it is to pursue those needs. So I look forward to that presentation coming. Next, I know that on Friends and Family Day that was brought up, Fidel sent us a note that the select board will have a table there. And we should probably put on a future agenda to think about what it is we want to do. We talked about advertising for volunteers and a few other things. So maybe we want to give that some thought in terms of what our presence will be at that activity. And last but not least, Lot 5. Fidel, do you want to provide a small update on that?
Sure.
So I will, that's the end of my stuff. Let me turn it over to the town manager.
All right, perfect. I will actually start with Birch Meadow on my update. I won't go into a lot of detail because the presentation that I delivered to FinCom is in the packet. But essentially, just want to echo what Mr. Bacci said. We are significantly over budget on the project for Birch Meadow. I do want to emphasize that we are significantly over budget because of inflation and because of market conditions. We did not add anything, any additional nice to haves as we were wrapping up the final design of the project. What I presented to Finance Committee is that we do have the option of essentially deferring the building, the pavilion, and there's a picture of the pavilion in the packet, as well as just a general layout of what's included. But what we heard from staff, Recreation Committee, and the Finance Committee, obviously, is that concerns of delaying because there is significant overlap of the projects, and essentially, if we delay, even a year, there is some concerns of whether costs are going to come down at all, and whether or not what is going to be built is going to be damaged, essentially, with the construction. So I spoke to a few select board members on this, and with the help of the Finance Committee, we really scratched our brain on how to fund this project. So Article 14 in the town meeting warrant covers this request, and slide page 10 of the packet essentially covers what was proposed by the Finance Committee, essentially reallocating pre-approved funds from two projects. One is the Parker Middle School roof. We are tracking an overage, basically funds that are not needed, of $600,000 in that project. We have also completed the renovation of the police department, and have an excess left over now that the project is completed of $180,000. That leaves us with a gap of $440,000. And in the Finance Committee, we talked a lot about funding options. The Finance Committee voted 8-0 to propose to town meeting to use the 40R incentive payment. That is funding that has to be used for a capital project. It cannot be used to supplement the operating budget, and it does require a 2/3 vote of town meeting members. But we are going to prep, obviously, including some outreach presentation on why this project is important. The Recreation Committee, in particular, shared that this project has been in the dockets for over 10 years, and that it seemed like an appropriate use of funds to get it done. Obviously, it is up to town meeting. Just a few more updates with regards to vacancies in DPW. We were able to fill a couple of vacancies, and we are down to 3 vacancies in DPW. One of them is for a mechanic, so a truck mechanic, and we are having a hard time with that vacancy. We are exploring, reaching out to some vocational schools and maybe even technical colleges to see if we could get creative with the SIRE, but we are feeling good about the where we are with vacancies in DPW. And just an update on Lot 5. We do have a full project that is ready to go out to bid, and just this week we received agreement and notice from Meadowbrook that the proposed easement that I presented to the select board at the last update. We are moving forward with it. That easement will be granted to the Conservation Commission, and does require a vote of the select board to grant that easement. And I think that's it.
And just to clarify 1 second on that, I think conservation has to vote it and then the select board has to accept it. And this is the technical terms, but bottom line is it goes to conservation first and then it comes back to us. But this is great. This is the
Yes.
progress we were hoping for. So it's not quite finished, but the attorneys are drafting the specific agreement and hopefully that was it very quickly. Any other questions or comments, board members? Chris, I see your hand.
Thanks, Mark. Just a point of clarification. During your entire liaison report, as well as Fidel, I would like us all to put our phones away because once again, Karen was on her phone the entire time typing away. I didn't hear anything that Fidel said. It's massively distracting, and we've already been over this, Mark.
I agree, and I think that if we have issues in terms of kind of etiquette, let's talk about them kind of on the side ourselves. I think that would be better than publicly here.
We already did, Mark. We already talked during our meeting, and it's still happening.
I'm gonna kind of stop us on this. Okay, point taken.
Thanks.
Any other comments, folks? Questions? All right, let's roll on. So the first report is going to be from the consultant on the water and sewer fiscal 24 rate study.
All righty, and I see Mr. Abrams on the line. Matt? Hello, sir. Please take it away.
All right, sure. Good evening, everyone. Members of the select board. My name is Matt Abrahams, part of the Abrahams Group. Happy to be with you this evening to talk about water and sewer rates. I know that Fidel has met with you in the recent past to give you a little bit of an intro, primer, if you will, for our presentation this evening. I put together a few slides for tonight, and I plan to go through them momentarily. But it's a lot of the same material that Fidel has already shown you in the recent past. As you're aware, the town has a flat rate for both water and sewer, and is now starting to consider changing the rate structure to a tiered rate structure instead. And as we'll cover just briefly, it is very common these days for communities that are MWRA members to have a tiered rate structure in place, and it is encouraged that those communities do. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to put some slides up on the screen and run through them.
Yes, please. Are you putting them up or is Caitlin putting them up for you?
It doesn't matter to me. I was planning on doing it, but I could go either direction on that one.
You should do it, Matt.
I see a hand in the background.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry, I'm having trouble hearing, and I don't know if others in the room are. Can we make the speakers a little louder in the select board room?
So is it just that Matt's voice is soft? Or are you
No,
hearing me?
I've
okay
had
right now?
trouble
Oh,
hearing
it's soft.
all of you online, and maybe it's just me here. But it's, our speakers above our heads are rather faint. So,
Okay, I will do my best to project for you this evening.
thanks.
So Matt, you're gonna use your slides. Great.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up, Mr. Chairman. My apologies.
No, no worries. I just wanted to make sure we had a plan.
Waiting for something to happen. Okay, I think we got it. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. As already mentioned, my name is Matt Abrahams. I'm part of the Abrahams Group, and we're here to talk about water and sewer. As you're aware, we have worked with the town for a few months now to compile data. What we typically do with that data, the first step is to take all the financial data that we're able to gather related to both water and sewer and put them into separate workbooks. The purpose of that workbook is to take a look back at the recent past to see what the historical results are of the fund's operations, and then to use the information that we have available to us to project forward. And typically for studies like these, we look forward about 5 years in the future, and that's what we've done for the town of Reading. So Fidel has received from me, I'm not sure if members of the select board have, but I know Fidel has received from me the latest versions of our workbooks where we have those projections. And we're going to show some of the information that we've gathered on some of the slides that I will be showing you this evening. In addition to that, we have produced a very large Excel workbook that I call our billing analysis. It has billing data from a recent 1 year period. It has all the bills up for all accounts in town, shows both their water and their sewer bills for that 1 year period. And the main point of compiling that data and using that file is to allow us to play around with different tier and billing structure possibilities. So we know your structure is today, it's a flat rate. There is a minimum, but it's a flat rate. That is very easy to calculate. You just take the usage, you multiply it by the rate, you have your bill, except when the minimum is applied. When you have to look at tiers, it's much more complicated than that because you would assign certain usage to certain tiers, and there would be different rates per tier. So there's separate calculations that would take place for each tier. And by compiling that in an Excel workbook like that, it allowed us to determine what different tiers, what the impact on bills would be for different tiers. And therefore it allowed Fidel and I to look at some different possibilities and ultimately get comfortable with one that could be proposed for the town of Reading. So please be aware that we have compiled that information. It is available to us, and it's a very powerful tool. So just like with the two workbooks, I will also show you some of the data that has been compiled in that billing file. Other than that, it's just been a few meetings between town staff and myself to make sure we're all comfortable with everything, and ultimately has led to the presentation that we're about to go through this evening. Rate study objectives. So bigger picture, what are some of the things that we're thinking about? What are some of the things that we've been looking at as we've progressed over time working with the town of Reading on water and sewer rates? We wanted to review historical and current water and sewer fund financials, really to get comfortable with the state of the water and sewer funds and also the health of those funds. Use historical and current financial and billing data to project revenues and expenses over a 5-year period. And we always look 5 years into the future. So the next future fiscal year is FY24, and the 5th year in the look is FY20. Grant rate options to ensure the funds remain in good financial standing, including targeting a routine earnings balance of 20% of fund expenses. So as we do this work and we're projecting forward, we're also taking a look at reserves and what they are, what we want them to be, or what we think we want them to be, and try and hit that target as well. So you may be aware, but both water and sewer have very healthy reserves at the moment. Sewer is healthier in terms of a larger retained earnings balance than water does, but they're both very healthy these days. We tend to recommend to communities that have water and sewer enterprise funds that they should look at having reserves between 10 and 25%. And when I say percent in this case, I'm talking about a percentage related to budget or to total expenses of the fund. So for Reading, we decided to target 20%. And you'll see as we move forward that currently both funds have balances well above the 20%. Consider the implementation of a tiered rate structure for water and sewer. And as I already mentioned in my introductory comments, we compiled billing data into a file that can be used to project revenues from a tiered rate structure. Again, a very powerful tool that has been very handy for the work that we've been doing with the town. And as already mentioned as well, Mass General Law states that MWA communities shall have a base rate that, quote, shall be increased at an increasing block rate to fairly reflect the resource demand and consumption of high volume users of water, unquote. In other words, there should be tiers, there should be increasing block rates to encourage conservation. Current rate structure, I don't think this is really unfamiliar to anyone here, but I'm still going to go over it anyway. Town bills users quarterly, and my understanding is that it happens the same months every year: July, October, January, and April. Water, the flat rate is $11.41 per 100 cubic feet of usage, and there's a minimum charge of $21.80 per bill. Based on the flat rate itself being $11.41, it's pretty. Users would have to use one or less than 1 unit of water in order to have that minimum charge. Sewer flat rate, $10.86 per 100 cubic feet of flow, so very similar way that it's billed for sewer compared to water. Also minimum charge for sewer. FY23 projections. So as already mentioned, we've gathered a lot of financial data. Considering where we are in the fiscal year calendar right now, we're just about done with the third quarter. So we're getting close to the end of the current fiscal year, which is FY23. So we are fairly comfortable projecting where we think FY23 will end up. The bills that are typically the highest or the most variable in terms of, when I say bills, I'm talking about bills that go to users for their water and sewer usage. Those most variable ones happen in the early part of the fiscal year, because those are the ones that get billed for the warmer month periods. And based on weather patterns, you're going to see variability for outdoor water use. Once you hit the colder months, there isn't as much variation. So we can look at prior year data and typically carry that forward to complete the fiscal year. I've done that projection here. So for water for FY23, even though we're coming off of a pretty dry season, last summer was pretty dry. So typically we saw increased outdoor water usage in the communities that we work with for water and sewer. Even though that was the case, we're looking at a projected deficit of about $300,000 in water with a retained projection. So this would be after close of fiscal year. $3.7 million, and I mentioned the 20% earlier. That's projected to be about 40%. On the sewer side, a projected surplus of $60,000, gain earnings of $7 million, 92%, actually 93%, around that, 93%. Again, this is the end of FY23, how we're projecting. So I already talked about the 5-year look in the future, so let's start looking at that look here. This is our baseline for water. When we say baseline, we're talking about a do-nothing scenario. Now, any responsible rate setters would not let this scenario happen. But when we say baseline, we're saying no rate action. So if you did absolutely nothing over the next 5 years, this is what you're looking at. The table shows projected surpluses and deficits. In this case, all deficits for the next 5 fiscal years. On the water, this is water. Projected retained earnings in the second row. And there's your percentages. I told you we're targeting 25%. The graph shows the targeting 20%. The graph shows the 20% line, the orange, and you can see the blue, which is your projected retained earnings. Starts off nicely and depletes pretty quickly under this. And here's the same exact slide for sewer. Also depletes, but takes a little bit longer because of how much is currently in reserves or projected to be in the reserve sector. Okay, let's start talking about rate options. So we've already mentioned how we're focused, at least on the possibility that a tiered rate structure is implemented. However, we also wanted to show you what an option would be if you chose to go with the status quo, meaning what a billing structure that has just a flat rate. If you continued to have a flat rate, we wanted to put together a rate option scenario for that. And for that, we're calling this for option 1, rate changes only. This is water. There's a lot here. So let's focus on the table first. Let's first focus on the table that's kind of to the top left here. In order to project and to target the 20%, I thought a rate plan, this is an annual increase of 3.25% annually was necessary in order to do that. You can see right below the 3.25%, so those are your projected new rates based on the 3.25% each year. And then you see an updated table just below that I showed you on the prior slides. Still showing deficits each year, but the deficits are less because you're raising revenues. There are your projected retained earnings numbers, and they're all in green because they're all above target, which is the 20%. And there's your updated graph. You can see that the blue still is heading downward, trending downward, but stays above the orange line the entire time and gets pretty close to that orange line by the end of the 5-year look, which is 7.28 in this case. And then the bottom table shows you what projected bills are for different user examples that we put together. These aren't real users in town. These are just, we chose nice round numbers for usage and included them in that table. We included 2 different average residential users. The 65 gallons per day is a Title V flow number that it's either the EPA or the DEP standard, I forget which one. But we've included that. And then also the 45 gallons per day was one that the town told me to focus on as well. So I included both. But your average residential user is going to be somewhere around those 2 numbers. And then we have other examples. There's a low-end user here, really low-end user, 500 cubic feet per quarter. And these are per bill amounts. It says that in the table. These are per bill amounts, quarterly bill. And then some larger ones, just to give you a sense of what these different rate increases would be for these different ones. And we have the same slide for sewer. Based on all the numbers that we've compiled, we're looking at 2% per year. And that gets you down around the orange by the end of the 5th year. Everything else is the same here in terms of layout. That's what was on the prior slide. Okay, option 2. Getting away from the rates only option, let's start focusing on the possibility of a tier structure. Objectives related to implementing a tier structure. Set tiers and rates per tier to recover a similar amount of revenue as in FY23. the way that we looked at it would mean that there really isn't a rate increase. It's more of just a transition year, if you will, without raising rates. I mean, for some, the rates will go up, obviously, but in terms of the total revenue that's being compiled, not a huge difference between the scenario that we're about to propose and the current scenario. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. The prior slide had a rate increase in year one. This one doesn't really have a rate increase in year one. It's designed to recover a similar amount of revenue. Aim to minimize impact on users' bills, avoiding large swings in bills. After initial implementation, can consider different changes to different tiers. So what I mean by aim to minimize impact on user bills was that you're not going to see a huge swing in year one under this tier structure. Of course, you will see some differences, but for most, there's not a huge difference in the bills that we calculate. Create 4 tiers with the option to switch to 5 in the future. So even though we have 5 here in these tables, you can see that the rate is the same for tiers 4 and 5. So essentially, that's really a 4-tier structure. And it ends with, so anything above 2,500 is going to have the same rate in this case. So the proposed structure, as we've been looking at it, water is on the left. You see your 5 tiers, the start and the end of each. Well, really 4 tiers, as I mentioned. Start and the end for each plus the rate. This would be an FY24 rate. And the same structure for sewer on the right. Rates are a little bit different, a little bit lower for sewer than they are for water. And here's the same slide, but with the tiers integrated in. So you can see the rate changes on our FY24. It says tiers. It doesn't say a rate percentage because there's different impact for different users based on which tier they fall in. And then we went with a straightforward rate increase from there. So the way that this would work, if you were to move forward with the plan as I have it here, is that once you hit FY25, all rates and all tiers would increase the same amount, 4.5%. And then also in the subsequent years that you can see there. And this, in terms of projections, follows a very similar pattern as the other 2 slides I showed you, with retainer is kind of drifting downward towards that target by the 5th year. And you can see different impacts on different users, the same user groups in the tables. And the first 3 rows of those tables, all users' first-year bills are projected to go down based on this rate structure. Once you get to what we're calling a large residential user, that's the first user where you see the bills go up. And then any user with usage higher than that, you would see the same. And then for sewer, the same layout. I have the increases of 2.5% per year after the implementation of the tier structure. And also you see the line getting down to the orange again. And a very similar setup for the bill impact table down below. The first 3 rows, we have year 1 going down for bills, and the last 3 rows we have going up. And that is all, Mr. Chairman. So I would happy to entertain questions and comments at this time.
Thanks, Matt. Board members, any questions or comments? And please raise your hand and wave so I can see you. Chris, I think I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So can you explain the 4.5% that was on that one slide? Why it was just 4.5? Is that the average between everything? Or you had 4.5 on the second to last slide? Well, I think the one before this.
This one?
Yes. So why is it 4.5 on a tiered? Is that just the average that you're doing, or? So it says
So
that,
the 4.5% on this slide represents what we would recommend in year 2 as the rate increase, not the year 1 tier change. So you'll see in the top left of that top table how I have the word tiers underneath FY24. So what that means is we're recommending the tier structure as was shown on the prior slide for FY24. And then looking forward the next fiscal year, which is FY25, what we think would be necessary to raise enough revenue to continue to target your retained earnings target of 20%. So that 4.5% in FY25 is a rate increase across all tiers after presumably the rate structure, the tier structure is implemented in FY24. Does that make sense?
Well, you saying it makes sense to me. I don't know why I would ever actually go with that based off just that alone, just 4.5 increases as opposed to 3.25 on the first slide. Like, why would we ever do that? I mean, that's just me looking at it. We're going up 4.5% as opposed to just sticking with what we have and just going up 3 point whatever the who on the other slide. Why would we ever just swap to this thing? I thought the whole purpose of the tiers thing was, you know, that we wouldn't go up these drastic changes. I know it's a simple 1-2% here, but that's 4.5 across the whole board. When we're dealing with, you always in the area of 3%. That's how it is for me.
Well, for the tier structure option, as I'm showing it here, year one doesn't really have a huge change for many users. So maybe you can look at it like there isn't really a rate change in year one, but there would be under this scenario in years 2 through 5. But if you go back to the other slide, which I think you just referenced a moment ago, this one has a 3.25 per year. So that includes year one. So this is 5 years of rate changes. The other one is more like 4 years of rate changes as we currently have it laid out.
Yeah, but then it's still 4.5 times 4, which would be what, 20 as opposed to 15, 16.25 on this. Like even that, it never averages out. I guess for me, I think the downfall is the tiered thing not having any percentage taken out of it in the first thing, which is making it significantly larger in the follow-up years. Why can't we implement it in the beginning? Or is it just, I mean, is this just what you came up with?
This is just a proposal. This is not what it has to be.
Okay.
So what I think what I'm hearing about is on the next slide, right? 2 slides down, actually. What would it be if FY24 had an increase as well, right? And that would be 3.25.
It would probably be similar to the 3.25, yes, or maybe a little bit less because of the impact that tiers generally have on billings. Once you introduce higher tiers, sometimes you don't need quite as much of a rate increase in a given year.
So that would be 3.25 spread. So all your 4.5s would change into 3.25 if we did that in the initial year?
Or less potentially.
Yeah, we don't know. We haven't run that, but we could run that.
No, I would just like to see that number too, because just seeing, if I had to pick between the two, not knowing all the other intricacies that we've already been over. Fidel and I, we had a meeting prior to all this stuff. I'm not sure if you knew that. Probably you did, but like seeing the numbers back then made sense to me, but then seeing it on here, it just 4.5. Like I don't know who wins in that scenario. It seems like nobody. But that's just
Well, if I could kind of chime in on that point. So the net effect that's going on here with what's on the slide that we're seeing here is that low-end users, the average 45 gallon per day user, and the average 65 gallon per day user are seeing lower bills than they would otherwise under the flat rate structure at 3.25%. Even in fiscal 26, I think. So for the first 2 or 3 years, they're seeing lower bills, the lower consumption. And obviously the tier structure is saying that, okay, if you're a bigger user, you're going to pay more for that. And then this increase of 4.5% per year, that doesn't even catch up to things, I think, until around fiscal 20. I'm looking at the low end users, and I think all the way up to 28, I think they're still paying a lower rate, a lower bill.
Under this scenario?
under this tiered structure, I'm just comparing it to your rate change only slide.
Yep.
So for all the way up through 28, the households using less water are getting a benefit, even with the 4.5% per year increase. I don't know if that added any clarity.
No, that was very helpful comment. Thank you.
Mark,
Oh, please.
thank you. You mentioned at the very beginning that you used a year of data for water usage, probably and sewer. What year did you use?
I can tell you in a moment. I think it was FY22.
So that would include part of COVID.
Yeah, it was FY22.
I think it was starting in July of 2021. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, it was FY22, which, yeah, I guess COVID still had an impact at that point, but also in terms of weather patterns, it was a wetter year. So presumably that had an impact on outdoor water usage. Maybe it was a little bit less outdoor water usage than there typically would be, which is one reason why we were comfortable using that year, because it would lead to projections that are a little bit more on the conservative side.
Yeah, no, I get it, but we can never control the weather. And like, I would rather see a usage of maybe 2019. You know, I know we don't go calendar year, but you know, if you picked middle of, well, not even into 2020, but because, you know, obviously early 2020, all the college kids came home and hybrid, so everybody was home. So yeah, 2021, it was better. The kids went back to school and the college kids went back to school. But I'd say that we at least maybe some impact, but not as much. But I think 2019 or fiscal 21 or even 20 would be a better use for, you know, when everything was normal as far as usage. I know households change and we can't control that either. Kids go to college, kids don't go to college, kids are elementary school. So it's not a huge deal, but yeah, I forget about the weather. We're gonna have dry, we're gonna have wet, we're gonna have a lot of snow, we're not gonna have a lot of snow. So it basically comes down to usage, what each household is using. So yeah, we're gonna need a lot of side-by-sides, I think, of us individually to study this. You know, for the tiered versus the one single rate. So this presentation is definitely helpful. But you know, we got for the tiered, we have it was a 4.25 plus the 2.5, right? That's what we have combined. So we have 6.75, right? That's what I'm seeing. 4.5 plus 2.5. Sorry, so it's 7. So you divide that, it's 3.5. That's how we combine the two rates. Right now, single tier, we're at 2 and 3.25, so that's 5.25 combined. Right, I'm reading this right, hopefully. And then the tiered is 4.5 plus sewer 2.5. And I remember at the private meetings that we needed like 3% increases per year to maintain and be part of MWRA. And I don't think these graphs, correct me if I'm wrong, that use any reserves. This is just what water rates, correct? Right? We're not applying $500,000 or $750,000 or anything to these.
I mean,
In this presentation.
you are, because you're projecting a deficit and you're okay with that, right? So we're not appropriating up front as we have in the past. But we're saying, you know, essentially we are projecting a deficit. So in theory we are,
Right. Okay.
just in a different way.
Right. Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
All right. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Quick question, maybe Fidel and Matt. So Fidel, in terms of branding, and Matt, in terms of other communities you're working with, other than, let's call it fiscal 21 COVID blip, are you seeing more water conservation? In other words, reduced usage per household? Is that kind of a trend that has been going on and we'd expect to continue?
Because COVID is
Because
no
people
longer.
are conserving water. Or not. I'm wondering, is there some overall trend that's going on?
I haven't noticed a change, especially with last summer being pretty dry. Some of the communities I worked with, their usage is way up this past year. I guess it also depends on how rural a community is, but I tend to work with more rural communities than non-rural. So.
Okay. So Fidel, I thought I saw a chart that we had at one point that was looking at average consumption, and the long-term trend has been downward. I'm sure other than a COVID blip. Am I not correct in that assumption?
Yeah, we received a report from the MWRA monthly, and it's got a 3-year average. I'll see if I can find it, but we definitely saw an increase in 2020, but it has normalized. I'll find the report and I'll share with the board.
Great. Excellent. Yeah, because I think part of what, as we're looking forward, I think part of what we got to think about is, what is happening in terms of generally conservation at the household level. And one of the things that I think was mentioned, early on is that I think our goal needs to be conserving water, and to kind of figure that out. And if this tier structure helps us in that mission, then it's constructive, and it also follows that Mass General Law that you took, I guess it was Mass General Law that talked about for MWRA communities in rates that correspond to consumption. And so I think, long term, we got to think about that. If we need to use a different base year, if that changes things, fine, let's take a look at that. But I think what we got to be looking at long term and overall here is, how do we encourage conservation? How do we set up a structure whereby, in particular, more moderate users are not carrying as much of the load as heavier users? And I think we've talked about our concern about water rates and trying to figure out how to keep them as much under control as we can. The reality is we don't have much control until we get rid of the MWRA assessment that's on us. That's the biggest piece. And again, see if there's anything that can be done to keep banging at it. But the reality is the rates are going to go up. And I think the question is, does it make sense to balance that according to usage? I think the tier structure does exactly that. And for that reason, I think it makes sense. Certainly tweak it. I'm sure there are things that aren't quite right that we want to adapt. But if the question is, hey, do we want tiered rates? I'm looking at more typical residential users seeing essentially lower bills for the next 5 years. And that sounds like a pretty good arrangement. I can't see hands, so please, if you please call out my name and I'll call on you if you're a board member.
Marcus Carlo.
Carl, please.
Thanks. Well, I guess what we don't see on here is we have the categories, 500, 1500, the 45, 65, and then the large, and then the very large. But what we don't see and what we were shown privately, and again, there's going to be a lot more that we have to do on this, is the percentages. And I agree with you that between low end and even 65 gallon, yes, but I forget what percentage that was of our residential users. I know it was mentioned to us, but I don't have it handy. So that's going to be a consideration too. I think it was an 85-15 kind of split, if I remember. So obviously that is the majority, but then when you get 15% and people getting hammered pretty hard. So again, this is a presentation, it's helpful, but I think we need to do the best we can to, some people save money, some people pay more, but not a lot more. I mean, we all know things go up, but how much, we'll do the best we can. I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I'm right now. 85-15 was low to the high, restaurants, bigger families, watering their lawns, whatever. That's all I had. Thanks. I remembered when I was talking.
It's 8416 that I have for
Okay.
water.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So just to be clear, 84% use 65 gallons per day or less. Is that what we're saying? I'm sorry, the 85% of the billables are for people using 65 gallons per day or less.
It's close. It's up to 2,500 cubic feet. So that's a little bit higher than 65 gallons per day, but it's right in the neighborhood.
Thanks. So Jack, you're carrying a little bit in the shadows for me and can't see if you have hands up.
Sure, I'll go
Please,
Mark.
Barry.
I'll go Mark. No, this is a great presentation. Thank you. I think this follows up nicely to the presentation that select board members received individually. And, you know, I'm just gonna echo a lot of Mark's comments. For years and years and years, we've seen a lot of increases in water and sewer. And there's a lot of discussion in this community about affordability issues. It's come out in the work that Recalc has done. Who's here tonight? You might want to ask about a quorum, but in any case, so I generally echo what Marcus said. I want to focus on a solution that looks at affordability going forward. And I like that this is a relatively short window to get to where we want to be with retained earnings. And I like a lot of it about this. And if we have to tweak a little, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Mark,
Jackie, please.
yes, thanks, Mark. So just to confirm next steps, we vote on water rates in like May timeframe? Okay. I'd like to see with the potential introduction of tiered rates, I'd like to have opportunities for the public to learn more about this other than either, you know, looking back at this meeting or, you know, reading about it. All due respect to our press, but if there's an opportunity to do like a public forum or something like that,
Sure, that's a great idea.
thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Chris?
Thanks, Mark. Just one more question, Matt. Has any other communities that you worked with went with the second meter scenario for sewer rates and whatnot?
Second meter for sewer rates? Do you
Yeah.
mean in
Meaning,
your,
yeah, so if residents got a second meter for sewer, where the rates, they wouldn't be impacted on the sewer for having the second meter? Because,
so it could be an outdoor water usage or an irrigation meter?
yes, yep.
Yeah, we know a few communities that do that.
Has it been somewhat successful or pushback, or what is the pro and con that you've dealt with?
Pros from a user perspective, the biggest one being what you just mentioned a moment ago. It's a way to avoid being charged sewer for water that is not used for sewer. So you're not being charged sewer flow for water that's not going through the sewer system. So that's a big pro for users that are able to take advantage of that. Negatives are, from a town financial standpoint, that's sewer revenue that would be lost. So presumably there would have to be some adjustment made to make up for that lost revenue. So presumably rates might have to go up in order to account for that. There's also, the initial effort of rolling it out. It's a program that would have to be established, have to be published, marketed. Then the town would have to decide who's responsible for paying for that meter, who's responsible for implementing it. If it's the town's responsibility, the town owns it. If it's the user's responsibility, if they own it. There are some pieces like that need to be worked out. I can tell you honestly that we know a few communities that have thought about this and decided ultimately not to move forward with it, just because they didn't think it was worthwhile enough to move forward. So hopefully that's enough information for you, but we could dig a little deeper on that if it would be helpful.
So one of the ones that did go ahead and move forward with it, did they go all in and just be like, here's 5,000 people getting meters, or was it staggered in, like Fidel had mentioned, with starting off with like 50 as a pilot program or something? Like any town example that you've done it with, have they just gone all in or just staggered it or?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because I've done analyses to help towns decide if they're going to do it. Some are still haven't made that decision, but I haven't handheld any communities as they move forward with it. So I'm not comfortable answering that, but my impression is that it's usually not a full rollout immediately. I just think that's too much for one town, which typically doesn't have a huge department to support that to handle.
Alrighty,
So it probably would end up being staggered in some form, I would assume, just based on that.
yeah, no, definitely. But thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you, Matt. Much appreciated.
Mark,
Board members, with your permission, why don't we take a 5-minute cupcake and restroom break?
Sorry, Mark. There's a question in the room.
I'm sorry, say again.
There's a question in the room.
From the public,
From Carla
from the
Massaro.
public.
Please. Vote quick.
Thank you, Mark. Carla Nazaro, Lawrence Road. Is it my understanding that the tiered rates in Massachusetts are not mandated? Or is this mandated, that we have to have a tiered rate rather than a flat rate?
Matt, you want to take that one? So the question is, are tiered rates mandated in the state of Massachusetts?
Well, if we go back to that wording that we had earlier, bottom bullet, Mass General Law does mention that MW communities shall have a base rate that increases at the block rate. So that's enough for me to say that because Reading is an MW community, they should have a tiered structure.
And can you tell me when that Mass General Law was put in place? The year?
I can try. Give me a moment.
And is this something that is kind of at your fingertips, or would we be better coming back to it at a later date?
It's probably gonna take me 2 or 3 minutes to find, but
And Matt, is
Can I suggest this, that let's ask you to do that and share that information with Fidel, and then Fidel share it with the board, with Carla and others that might be interested in that.
Thank you, Mark. And a couple more questions. When you move into tier 4 and tier 5 in Reading specifically, how many, for those families in tier 4 and tier 5, can you tell me how large those families are presumed to be before those rates increase? In terms of water consumption?
How many people?
Mhm.
How many people? So the question mark is when you go to a commercial, a large residential user, how many people is that roughly?
So when the rate goes dramatically up when it moves from tier 3 to 4, what are you talking about, or what are you projecting for family size at that point?
I imagine he's got to do some math because what we're doing, what we use is 45 gallons per person per day,
Okay.
right? So Matt, I don't know how good you are with math.
I might be able to get that relatively quickly. Just give me one moment.
So you got to convert it.
Yeah, so it's probably the way that those tiers are designed in the proposal that we had, you're probably looking at 3 or more people
Okay,
per house.
so to me, this tiered rate system seems punitive to large families. Am I reading that wrong? if you have a family that's larger than 4 people and you've bounced up the rates to 14%, that is inequitable to me, to large families. So if we're trying to, if Mass General Law tells us they're doing this tiered system to encourage conservation, but when you have a large family, it's being punitive. When you have to wash 6 bodies and you have to flush enough toilets for 6 people, conservation is if the goal is conservation, I feel like this is punitive to large families. Am I wrong?
And I can make a suggestion here. One of the things that we definitely need to see is how many bills fit into each of these categories. So we're making an assumption that there are a lot of people in that large residential. We should see how many there really are.
I'll use myself. I didn't want to. I will use myself as a family of 6 who falls into the tier 4 category. Okay? Taking it from a mother who is very conscious about conservation. You can ask my children and you can ask my husband. I do not feel like a family of my size should have to pay and supplement above and beyond what I would normally pay for water to supplement a family of 3 or a family of 2. I would also say, I'm going to give you a scenario. You take a family of, I'll use my own, 6, who have people in college, right? We have a certain amount of disposable income, multiple children in college. Colleges are increasing 3 to 4% a year over 4 years. More mouths to feed, more clothes to buy, right? More expenses. Our pool inflation. Some people will choose not to eat out because they'll rather cook at home, which will increase your water usage. Some people will choose to not take vacations, but will choose to install a pool for entertainment for their families. Those families will be penalized under this rate. So unless somebody can tell me differently, I think this is punitive to larger families. And I don't think larger families have the disposable income to be paying for smaller families. It's not based on income, it's based on usage.
I think this is a great reason to have a hearing, as was suggested, and to have a bit more of a presentation set up that starts to look at a bit more of impact and numbers of families and number of people in different tiers. I think that with some preparation, that would be a great aspect for that public forum. I think that rather than using the select board meeting for that tonight, let's make that part of the public forum and have that discussion before we decide on our water rates.
Thank you, Mark. I think the reason why I came up to speak is because I keep hearing from the board that it will help so many families. It will help 85% of the families. People's bills will go down. You're not speaking for the whole community, you're speaking for a population of the community. So that's why I felt like I needed to express that for the other 15%. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. All right, so let's board take a restroom and cupcake break. I'm just trying to find my actual clock here. 8:35, how about we come back at 8:40? All right, so board will take a recess till 8:40, and I'm gonna do my best to, that was my
quorum of recount.
First things first?
Yeah.
Can we ask Rob to resume recording?
Good idea.
All set.
Good? Thanks, Rob. Okay, so I understand recount may have a quorum, so it's either John O'Neill or John Sasso in the room, Chair, Vice Chair?
Yes.
John Sasso is.
John Sasso, could I ask you to call
Sure.
for a quorum?
I'm gonna quickly do a quorum check for recalc. Those present, John O'Neill. Present, Mark Doxler,
Yes.
Nora Bucko,
Yes.
Michael Coltman, Ron Assini, John Parsons.
Here.
And John Sasso, present. So we'll call
Thanks,
recalc to order.
Great, thanks. Marilyn, you want to call, see if you have a quorum for Council on Aging, please?
Sure. Debbie Small, Joe Coco, Karen Fatina, Karen Panett, Marilyn Shapley, yes, Nancy Zimlack, John Parsons.
Yes.
John. Sally Hoyt, Sandy Schaefer, Jackie Behenna, Rosemary Di Benedetto, Beverly Cuneo, Karen Janowski. Yes. Nancy Twadros. Yes. And Jean Prado. Okay, so we do not have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So John Sasso, are you going to be making the presentation? If so, if you could come forward to the podium.
Sure, thank you, Mark. Do we have slides? Can someone?
Yep.
Put those up?
Caitlin. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to first acknowledge the folks on the recalc committee that have put in all the work over the last year or so. What we're going to present tonight is kind of the summary of the work that's been done thus far. Also, I'd like to thank, obviously, Select Board for creating the committee and giving us guidance on this work. Members of the Council on Aging, our Elder Services staff, the UMass Gerontology Institute that supported the survey, and also on some independents. I would like to just call out Jean Delios, Kevin Bohmeyer, and Jenna Fiorente for all the support that they've given to the recalc committee. So we did present back in October, at which point the Select Board decided to extend the committee to June 30th, primarily to kind of wrap up the work. And so hopefully what we'll present tonight is kind of a summary of where we ended up. I don't think it made it into the packet, but there was a final summary report. I think it did get ultimately sent out. This presentation's a bit of an outline of that. There are a couple other reports that were attached to it or will be attached to it and presented. One obviously being the UMass survey results. I think everybody has seen that. There's also a site visit summary that we put together that Recalc went out and did. And there's also a communication plan that was put together. So those will all be attachments to the final summary report when it gets posted. I think regardless of what gets decided as a result of Recalc's effort, I think at least from the perspective of Recalc, we see the efforts are continuing. There's a lot of activity going on and priority has been given to this. So I think a lot of the boards and committees and commissions involved are energized to act. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. And just lastly, throughout this presentation, you may see the term ACC. It's referred to as an all ages community center with dedicated space for 60 plus. That's actually the term we used in the survey. So we kind of went back and made sure that was the correct term. So in case you hear that term, I just want to make sure everybody understands we're referring to that as kind of the all ages community center approach with the dedicated space for 60 plus. Next slide, please. So at a very high level, you guys charged us with exploring current and future needs of the community, come up with planning for potentially a new senior center or a community center, focusing on residents in age 60 plus and possibly other members of the community. I think I'm here to present that Recalc has done that job. We've actually gone out and identified current and future needs. We'll go through that a bit today. And then we've also solicited the community's preference in terms of what sort of facility that should look like. We'd like to make a primary recommendation. There's a whole bunch of things that came out of this, but primarily we really think it's still important to identify and implement a solution to the facility needs for the senior population in the immediate timeframe, immediate being next 2 to 3 years. So how that gets done and what that really means, we can talk a little bit about. We've got some next steps identified later on, so certainly be interested in your insights on that. But we feel that's really the primary recommendation we want to make on top of some other future planning activities. Next slide. I won't spend a whole lot of time here. This is kind of the back story. Recalc was presented back in November of 2021. And most recently, folks heard the presentations from UMass on the survey results. Again, I won't walk through all the rest of these kind of historical information. Next slide. Again, this also is a bit of a history. Why are we doing this? I think the answers are pretty clear. We do want to have a future plan. We do need to understand what the needs are, and that's one of the primary objectives for Recalc. We recognize that we have a growing senior population, and our staff is having difficulty meeting those needs. We did actually see in the survey, we actually queried them that some residents are actually leaving for other services in other communities. Next slide. So not to pour salt on a wound, but we still have deficiencies with our current Pleasant Street Center. This is not intended to be a complete list. We've had some updated pictures. I thought the most interesting one was the computer game room one, where you see the pool table and you can see the pool stick there hanging on. There's not enough room for someone to stand and actually make the pool from the corner. So this is, I mean, obviously, I think everybody has had an opportunity to see, those that have had an opportunity to see the Pleasant Street Center, actually try to use it, experience it, do see that there are a number of deficiencies. We still have our work cut out for us to communicate to folks what those issues are. Our COA is actually working on some more explanatory video and information to further highlight these issues, but clearly most folks that we've spoken to have a pretty good picture of what the issues are. So just want to make sure we don't leave this without mentioning that here. Next slide. So what did we do? So Recalc employed a number of different strategies to try to do its job. One was engage the community. Obviously, I think everybody is aware that we did forums, we did focus groups, we did surveys. So we did a number of different activities to solicit information. We tried to make this a collaborative effort. We incorporated input from primarily from the Council on Aging, but also from our Elder Services staff and other boards. We went out and we benchmarked 15 local senior and community centers. So I want to thank the other communities for inviting us in and letting us do that. Communication continues to be an answer. Communication continues to be an issue that we keep hearing about. So we took a proactive approach to establish a communication plan and list out all the things that we were going to do. And even with that, the feedback was more communication. So I think we certainly started that process, but we recognize it's still not complete. And then lastly, as a result of all this, we spent some time exploring, well, what would an all-ages community center really look like? What would those needs really be, and what are the facility implications for something above and beyond kind of meeting the senior needs? Next slide. So in addition to the primary recommendation, these are kind of like the supporting recommendations, additional things that need to be done. We're going to talk about needs in a bit, but we really need to go through those needs in a bit more detail and prioritize them. During the survey, we asked folks for input on these. We asked them to give us feedback, but we really didn't put them in any prioritized order. So I think there's still a hole in that needs to be done. We need to do a better assessment and then figure out for each of those what is the best way to approach and address them. Recalc actually generated a working group, I think working group is the right name, when, on the Harnden Street property originally. And they, in that working group, help provide some feasibility on what like an initial center there might look like. So there is still a need for any new center that gets put forth or any new ideas to actually have some sort of a feasibility study explored further. So what we're presenting here is not the result of any detailed feasibility study. That work still has to be done. We really would like to see a continued advocacy for investment in Eldon services. Although not a specific recalc output, with the ARPA funds that came forward, that was a great add to elder services, and we think we still need to continue to do that. From the budget perspective, there'll be some slides on kind of services and administration later on that, so we'll talk about that. We have to figure out what do people really want from a communication standpoint. How do we get in touch with them? I mean, one of them. For the survey, we sent out a card to every adult in the community. So not just like one card per family, but every adult's like 20,000 some odd cards. So we've tried to really push communication, but clearly it's not enough. So we need to do more. And then the last recommendation really was something that Recalc formally voted on, which is we support the idea of an all ages community center, assuming that the needs of the seniors are being met first. Next slide, please. So again, one of the biggest things we need to look at were needs. So we did look at in the survey and primarily, and from the focus groups and some of the other things that we did, we tried to identify what those needs were. I think I think a couple interesting insights, and then we'll get into some of the areas. So one was that even though there are some differences in age group, the implications for the facility based on those needs really aren't that different. So at least I should say appears to be consistent and similar. So even though one person may say I want this versus that, the impact for a facility may not be that different. And we didn't, as I said, we didn't ask for prioritization. So we asked people to kind of select their top 5. So this gives you a little bit of an insight into what those top 5 things might be. And those results kind of did align. So we did see a lot of, the people that selected those top 5, it wasn't like they were all over the place. There was a pretty good grouping along those. So I think that gives us some confidence that at least we've identified the ones that people identify as important. There was a clear difference in some of the service needs by age group, but I think that was kind of obvious, like, childcare needs as a service is very different than adult daycare so the differences in age groups and how they answered, there were some differences in those service needs. I don't think that was unexpected. They have some facility implications, but again, those were things that I think are more important to look at when you look at the differences between meeting a senior need in a senior center versus some other need in an all ages community center. So to make it simple and try to also organize this in a little bit more cohesive manner, we identified 8 areas of needs. So I'm going to walk through those just pretty quickly, talk a little bit about what each of them are and kind of their implications for the facility. Next slide, please. So socialization, we put this forth because it is a common theme. Kind of every aspect of bringing people together is socialization. So even though, in one respect you may say, well, they want a physical fitness class, well, that's also socialization. So in an overarching way, socialization really is a big piece of all of this. But there are some specific facility implications for socialization. One in particular is a cafe or drop-in space. We did find that, and many of those local center visits had dedicated lounge space. So I think that was an interesting piece. And then obviously having some dedicated space for various things, as well as the large multi-purpose space that can be broken up for different organizations and also just made open for larger activities. Next slide, please. Oh, I should just mention the pictures on the right-hand side in these slides here. Some of them are from the bottom one you can see. Actually, that was a Pleasant Street Center slide. Some of them are other that we pulled off, and then others you'll see the name of a city or a town there. That's a picture from one of the other communities we visited. So just to highlight what those little words in red in the corner mean. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Thanks. Interesting in specialty program offerings. I think this is an area where we've heard we don't necessarily expect that every activity in program has to be in Reading, but we want to have a large enough draw to bring in more people, engage a larger demographic. Some of the ideas that came up in the surveys and in the focus groups were things like art and theater, clubs and games, enrichment courses, cooking, technology. These all have very specific facility implications. So if you're going to have an art or a room like that, then you want to have some dedicated space for that. If you want to do theater or something like that, maybe you have to have a stage. So there are very specific things, technology, computer room, whiteboard, technology, whiteboards, spaces. So there's things like that that are important. The multipurpose space continued to be a common theme. We want multipurpose space. We want to be able to use it for multiple things and break it up. And we also want, one of the items came in, we want to make sure that all of the things that we put together are accessible, inclusive, things like having technology for audio video presentations, capacity to have people zoom in or come in virtually. So those sorts of things are things we'll have to consider from a facility perspective. Next slide. So one of the top attended programs at the Pleasant Street Center are those associated with physical activity, Zumba, yoga. So yoga. So this was clearly a consistent feedback about having facilities that support access to those types of fitness programs, as well as access to exercise equipment. There are options to expand those programs into other things like dance and movement, meditation. So again, the implications for these sort of things are dedicated space, perhaps space that's designed with the correct sort of flooring, dedicated fitness rooms, exercise rooms. This certainly seemed to be a top item selected by folks on the surveys, as well as feedback on the forums and focus groups. Next slide. So meals, this again, I think this is associated with socialization, having meals and giving folks the opportunity to come together. But having the option for a daily meal wasn't just deemed a priority, but also appeared to be a common service offered by a lot of the peers that we've looked at. Really, the differentiating factor is the amenities needed to support the provision of meals. So we really can't do very much on-site preparation. It's my understanding, and I think we did get this confirmed, that the stove in the Pleasant Street Center is not working. It's shut off.
Dishwasher now is, but now the dishwasher is. So that makes sense that the stove will be working.
So we have some challenges there. So it is limited. I mean, meals can be brought in and so supported, but there are some that's really limited in terms of how much we can really do there. And so, in addition to actually having the kitchen and being able to support the meals, we want the programmatics to go with it. We want people to tell us, okay, how do we focus on nutrition classes, or how do we do some maybe food prep classes, and having the ability to do that in a kitchen that has enough space is really important. Again, the slide of the current Pleasant Street Center, the kitchen is probably less than the size of this table here. So. And so whatever we end up deciding with regards to open space in terms of providing service, we need to have a kitchen that's capable of supporting that. And one of the things that we heard from our surveys and from going out to talk to other community centers was having a commercial kitchen to be able to support much larger groups. Next slide. So outdoor activity, we don't have any local pictures here, but there's certainly been an expression of desire for some outdoor space. In terms of listing the 5 items listed under facility implications were the ones that people had come back and told us they were interested in seeing. Next slide. So administrative services, so again, this is in not only just having the facility, but also the staffing. I think everybody knows right now, the Pleasant Street Center does not really provide a good environment for our staff from that standpoint. We can't do one-on-one appointments with residents. The bottom three pictures you see on this slide, those are pictures from the Pleasant Street Center. The larger one in the middle there, that's the office in the hallway. I think the one in the back is an office with walls in a temporary office space. So it's really a very difficult environment. And so we really need to look at, when we put this together, having good administrative service support. So we can meet the needs of the community and that the staff can execute their jobs appropriately. And that may also mean, again, provision of adequate staffing, which I know they're finally getting up to stuff there. It's interesting. I think it's Needham that if you look at the Needham, which I think is a relatively new center, as a comparative picture, is night and day. Next slide, please. So accessibility. This came back as a really important item overall. We talk about accessibility in a couple different ways. There's the support for disabilities, hearing, sight, handicapped accessibility, ADA, beyond ADA compliance from an elder services perspective. But then there's also the accessibility associated with, when can we go to the center? What's the hours of the center? We have seniors that work during the day and can't use programs, because the center's closed at night. The ability for transportation, people that aren't driving, how do they get to and from the center? Or that want to drive but don't have parking because there's not enough on-site or satellite lots. So there's that sort of accessibility. And then there's even the accessibility of how do we communicate to people to know what the programs are, how do they register for it, how do they get that information? So there's a couple different kind of dimensions to accessibility. So the implications, again, as I said, what are the hours? What's parking and transportation? How do we allow virtual participation? How do we design for disabilities? We had a really nice presentation a couple months ago from one of the consultants on designing for accessibility. So I think COA has also been really vocal about making sure that we keep that front and center with whatever approach we come up with. Next slide. So affordability was actually, we decided to separate this out. It's actually, within the survey, was considered kind of an accessibility feature, but I think it's relevant to keep it separate. The most selected accessibility feature for a senior/community center was little to no cost to participate in programs. So there was definitely a theme running through that we need to be cognizant of the implications of cost. So the other thing we surveyed was about the cost of the center itself. So I'm not going to try to parlay this into implications, but I'm just going to present the data. 47% of the residents that took the survey, and again, there were 1,470 people on the survey, said that they'd be willing to pay up to $200 per year in annual property taxes. And 64% indicated they'd be willing to pay up to $100. On the flip side, a third of those said that they wouldn't support a new building if it required any increase in taxes. And those willing to pay more than $200 was only 23%. So there's a pretty interesting dichotomy of views here. What that really means and how we deal with it as a community, I don't think I have the answer to that question at the moment, but I think it's important. I think the important piece is that last bullet, which is the residents' concerns about affordability and the realization that some may be priced out of the community if the increase in taxes and other expenses continue unabated. I don't think that's an unknown, but I think it's worth restating. Next slide, please. So we just talked about center needs. The other biggest piece you guys asked us to do was give you an idea about preference. What I'm trying to show is kind of the most preferred scenario. So again, 82% of the, so on the right-hand slide is the chart from the UMass report. If you look at all ages, about 82% of the respondents in total selected either a senior center for residents age 60 plus or an all ages community center with designated programming space for 60 plus. Now, it obviously the preferences for this between those two do change based on age. I don't think that's surprising. I would also say that we gave everybody an opportunity to elaborate on that selection. So about half of the respondents actually wrote something in on top of that. About 21% of those that wrote in said, we really think this is a community center is a great idea. It provides an opportunity for community cohesion and inclusion. And then there's about the same number that said, hey, we really don't think we need a new building. We have enough stuff going on here. We don't want to spend anything more. So it was again another interesting dichotomy in the results. Again, I present this as just the data. I will say we do. If you go to the next slide, please. We do say that we believe that there is a desire for an all ages community center with dedicated senior space. It's real. But as I said before, it can't. We don't believe it should take precedent over first meeting the program, service, and facility needs of our seniors. It should, however, take into consideration all the other things that are being done in the community. How could those influence and affect the development of an ACC, perhaps, knowing that something else is being done elsewhere? So I think was the piece that we wanted to bring in to, that kind of pushback was, okay, well, if we want to do this, that's great, but make sure that we don't do things that we're already doing elsewhere, or we don't take advantage of them. And again, there always should be separate space programs and services for older residents. I think that's, again, that's the takeaway from Recalc as it relates to center preference. Next slide. So where do we go from here? So again, going back to the primary recommendation, really kind of identified 3 real steps here. No specific answers to these, but number 1 is define and execute an immediate facility solution for replacing and or expanding the current senior center. We need to do something better. We want to continue to invest in programming and services for the seniors, providing better accessibility, new offerings, and address some of the other questions that have come up, like transportation and evening hours and whatnot. And the last thing, again, sound like a broken record, we need to continue to communicate. We need to let folks know what's going on and continue to get their input as we develop these solutions. Last slide. So where do we go from here for Recalc? So Recalc was scheduled to sunset by the 30th of June. The extension of the work from November was intended to allow us to finish and kind of present back our final recommendations. So here they are. I think, Recalc believes it's developed an in-depth understanding of the community needs in this area, and whether we continue to exist or not, executing these recommendations found in the summer report will benefit from continued support from members of Recalc, whether it's a committee or not. And I think that's it.
Thanks, John. And I want to thank John in particular because the entire group worked really, really well together and did a lot of work, as you can see. And John took on the responsibility to kind of pull it all together, not only for this report, but also for the communications plan. And I really appreciate
Thank you, Mark.
all that. I think the entire board does. So thank you so much for that. And again, the entire group was great. I think you've stated here clearly on this last slide is kind of saying, okay, we've done what you asked, select board, what's next? And a desire from participants in this process to stay involved and help drive things forward. So I think that's awesome. Much applauded. Board members, any questions or comments?
You can go first, Karen.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, John. That was terrific. Thank all of you. I feel like we lost somebody, but yeah, it's been a long project, and this is really great. This is like 100 years ahead of where we were when you guys started. And so one thing, though, I've been serving as the liaison to the Council of Aging and speaking to a lot of folks in the communities, going to these forums, and so what I thought I heard from my colleague was that you guys had taken a vote to call it a multi-generational center, which is just in my mind an adult sounding term, and maybe I misinterpreted it. But
Yeah, if I can interrupt just for 1 second, I apologize. But so we actually, I think in the conversations we were
Yeah.
going through this, we got a little bit jumbled ourselves,
Okay.
which is why I went back to the All Ages Community Center term, which is the term we actually presented to the community in the survey.
Okay.
That just to be clear,
Alright.
yes, we actually got confused with intergenerational at one point as well. So I think the short story is that there's this concept of a senior-only center, and then there's the concept of a full community center, but with dedicated space for seniors. And how the programming works in a full community center, that's a different question per se, but we weren't trying to limit it with that terminology.
Well, also, okay, so, because I think we're gonna get, I know there are seniors that are like not looking for any kind of solution where we have a children's room and we offer daycare, and there's, I'm gonna be sarcastic, surly teenagers running around while they're trying to relax in their cafe. Just gonna put that out there. So, you know, and one of the Council on Aging members, they might chime in and say the same thing. I've heard this real concern, but this is, and while I absolutely don't doubt that, you know, if funds were unlimited and your charge was a little different, like, it'd be great to build a community center that was big enough to maybe do more. I'm just worried about the communication and the messaging because, so the library right now, I've actually come to realize is maybe offering a lot of the programs that we might offer in a senior center. It also has a children's room, it offers teen programs, and it's really, really booked. So I can, so that's one model. So if we have we used to use the Pleasant Center at night. Groups used to be able to use it. We don't do that. That's a staffing issue. We also had other spaces like RCTV that we don't have access to. There's a very real demand for space at night if it's not otherwise being used by seniors per se. But I'm just, I'm expecting emails and phone calls about this, there's some communication going forward in the community about what we're talking about building using this all ages community center. That was just,
Yeah,
I don't really have a solution,
Yeah.
but you're talking about more communication, so we can work on it. I've already heard this concern. I feel I'm gonna hear it again.
I'm not sure how to answer the question, other than to say, well, first and foremost, again, we weren't necessarily chartered to say this is the solution and be done with it.
Yeah.
I think I'll restate the recommendation, which is we have to solve our senior needs first.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, we need to make that a reality first. I mean, I think everybody has seen some of the other presentations that have gone over the last couple months, you know, looking at what if or what could be. That's all they are. They're what if and what could be. They still don't fully answer the question of we have to meet all our senior needs. And certainly I'm not even going to touch the question of, well, what does that mean fiscally? So we have to answer all those questions. And, you know, this is really something that's kind of left back on your plate. To some extent, but having said that, a little bit tongue in cheek, the good news is that there are a motivated group of folks in COA and Recalc and these organizations that are willing to step up and put some time in and effort in to help answer those questions. And one of the things that I tried to emphasize in the presentation was we really do need to sit back down and look through this stuff again, and really with a fine eye towards, okay, what do we really need to do? How are we going to do it? And how we're going to do it in a time sensitive manner? And then where does that lead us for the rest of it? And again, I don't have that answer. Recalc doesn't have that answer, but I think we at least at this point have a path that makes sense to follow. How all the other pieces of that are going to come together, I'm still not sure we know.
Because I think your presentation is clear. You're focusing on adult needs, when we're talking all ages, adult and senior needs. But just that literally that name, if that's gonna go buzzing around the community, people are gonna start like thinking all kinds of different things. So anyway, we can address it. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thanks, Karen. Chris?
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, John, for the presentation. So I have two question comment scenarios. First, we still have a gas leak at the senior center.
Yes.
So why isn't something being done about that immediately? I don't want this to be North Andover or whatever scenario that happened before. Is it our gas? Is it National Grid? why is this an issue? Especially if the oven doesn't work.
Every time that there's smell, an odor of gas, right? We come on site and a couple of times the fire department actually came on site, right, and measured in the building. There was no trace of natural gas in the building. What we have found is it is most likely exhaust from the heating system that is essentially returning back into the building. We've had it tested. Unfortunately, it's an old building, and the intake and the exhaust are too close together, right? So essentially, it's cycling back into the building. It is not natural gas.
So what is the building heated with?
So it is. I'm sure that the actual heating function happens in a boiler in the basement. It's the recirculation of air.
Yeah, but are there an oil heat there, or how is the senior center heated?
I do not know that question. I can find out. I assume that it's natural gas.
Because
it was
the
renovated
gas,
at night.
that's my biggest thing. Like I mentioned it before with David and the climate and the leaks that are out in the street and all that. But this is our actual building. Like something's going to get done with this. We can't be seeing smell of gas on presentations in red and just carrying on like there's no big deal.
It is not. It is not natural gas, and it has been tested.
Okay.
That's what I can say.
And then my other question, comment kind of thing on affordability. Just seeing, I know you didn't want to touch on the number because, it is what it is. But just once again, I remember the first meeting that we had, the public meeting at the senior center. That's when I stood up and asked the question that how many want a new senior center? If it was here, you didn't have to pay for it. Everyone's like, okay, let's go. And then I said, how many you want to pay? How much? And if you have to pay for it, how many want to? And like, here we are with the results of the survey with exactly what I did in there. And I got, unfortunately, a letter written about me because I asked the question then. But like, it's very valid and warranted. Just seeing on here, willing to pay more than $200 a year is only 23%. How is that going to pass on the ballot? I mean, we have to work on something has to be done because the building is inadequate. But just seeing the number on there is very disheartening to see because I think it's going to be well over 200, especially when you add programming and everything else and staffing. I mean, something has to be done. It's just, like you said, it's a very difficult place to be in. Something has to be done. But I mean, these numbers right here don't look good for something. But thank you, John. It was well put together.
Me again, Mark. Thank you.
Carol.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of good information, but I've seen a lot of this before, but this is presented. I like the 8 different categories. But if anyone here in the room or on Zoom, I don't think I've ever asked this before because even Karen brought it up about evening hours and lack of staff. Does anyone that's listening right now recall if the other senior centers have a lot of programming at night? Or are they struggling with having evening hours, evening program as well, due to the lack of staff in the United States?
So can I, so we actually have that data. I don't want to misquote, but my perspective, my remembrance is most of the ones that we looked at, especially the senior ones only. So we did look at some community centers versus seniors, so there might be a little bit of difference in those, but for most of the senior ones, they were kind of 8 to 4 type approaches. Some of them rented out space on evenings and weekends. But I think in terms of core programming, I suspect the answer will be when I look it up that's the answer. I'll get back to you specifically on that. It's actually in the report that we wrote up as well.
No, thank you. And that just goes to the struggles that we're all having. If you own a business, run a town, manage a senior community center, if we can't provide these services now, how do we do it with a senior, a building that's double in size? And that's one of my concerns. That goes to budget and staff and quality of staff. But, you know, the glaring thing that always has stuck out to me is this, you know, outdoor activity. And right now, you know, we're pursuing something that most likely cannot provide any outdoor activity. But, you know, that's just a work in progress. But, yeah, never mind the monetary issues. And these numbers are the average of the $100, $200. It's not, you have a house and that's all you're getting is a $100 increase. It's the average. Some will get more, some will get less. So there's a lot of work to do, but this is a good step forward. I commend all you guys for all this work. You meant a lot. And of course, we need to do something. I mean, we've known that for a long time. It's just, how do we pay for it? Where does it go? And how do we satisfy the majority of the needs, which seem to be, you know, a bigger building and outdoor space and smaller rooms and everything else, and good parking, accessibility. So I think we'll get there. But if we can't work on that now with our current building, evening hours, every other Saturday, let's do something. I think we have to start there. I mean, that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. If I could just chime in on that, I think it's a good idea. I think we can do something. We've got some ARPA money. We can try some different things. And a number of the other centers, even if they have more space, my observations, and we can check this in the data, it's not like they suddenly double their staff to handle that. They're able to coordinate activities. They figure out the right things to do. So it requires more commitment and more staff, no question. But I don't think it's kind of 2 times the space, 2 times the staff. I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. And all these issues, the point of doing all the work we did was to start addressing those issues. That's exactly what we did. We kind of highlighted what some of the key issues are here. So we solve all of them? I don't think so. I think that's a lot to ask. But we can do a lot. And I think everyone so far has kind of reiterated, we got to do something. And we got to do it soon. It's been going on like this for a really long time. It's not appropriate. And, we're not serving that as part of the community sufficiently. And, let's get going. So I think, I commend Recalc. This was their mission. I think they did a great job. I think it'll come back into our laps in terms of either having a particular solution or having to look more broadly again. But now we have the material to work with. And now we can go out and say, okay, this is what we're looking for, folks. Give us some options. So let's see where that takes us. Jackie, did I see your hand?
Yeah, no, just briefly, thank you, John and committee members, for your service on this. I think this 8 areas that you identified should serve as a lens for us to the extent we're looking at specific facilities proposals or specific programming proposals. And I'm glad that we have that, as well as all of your work looking at some of our peer communities. When I first joined the board and I met with Jean Delios, she was in the middle of that road tour and gave me a glimpse into all the footwork that was done on this and all the collaboration. And I think this has been a really good example of how we rely on boards and committees to tackle our issues. And I hope that to the extent that we get another opportunity to weigh in on this, which I expect we will in town meeting, I hope we'll give your work another opportunity for kind of highlighting and educating. Thank you.
Anything else, board members? Okay.
Can I make a comment on the staffing issues?
You gotta come up, John.
John, can you come up front, please? And please introduce yourself.
John Parsons, Recalc, and the Council on Aging representative to Recalc. Just to answer the question, in my opinion, on the staffing, I don't think it's as big a problem as some people might think. The Zoom is run by the Zumba instructor. The art is run by the art instructor. The yoga is run by the yoga instructor. These are all outside people that are hired to come in and do this. The Bridge group runs itself. The Cribbage group runs itself. If they started a Canasta group, they would probably run themselves. So and if other programs were added, like maybe chair yoga instead of the regular yoga, a chair yoga person would be coming in. So staffing could be somewhat of an issue, but I don't think it's as big an issue as some people might think it is.
Thanks, John. Marilyn has her hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, my experience is I ran around and saw quite a few centers too. Some as part of recalc and some as just my own investigation. And regarding night, I don't know that it's every night there have to be activities kind of model. It's not an all or nothing. It's sort of a phased in, but some programs in particular, like there's no access to the Shine consultants to someone who is either working, or many people have caregiver responsibilities during the day. I mean, there are lots of varieties of people that the 8 to 3 just doesn't work. And so much as the town has evening hours to accommodate one night a week to accommodate people that have to have evening hours to take advantage, I think that might be something that would be there. But I don't know that we need 5 nights a week of activities boom overnight. So, think more gradual, but think prioritizing what sort of services are we denying to people over 60 because the senior center just doesn't offer it in the evening. So I just want to throw my 2 cents in with that. And I agree with John Parsons about our not necessarily needing that much extra staff. It's not like it will double, and I agree with you, Mark, on this as well. I think there are lots of things we can do creatively, and I just want to thank John Sasso and Recalc. I think it's an excellent report, so thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Board members, any last comments?
Carlo again.
Carlo again.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, I didn't say every evening. So it's just to make that clear, I did not say every evening, every weekend. I was referencing, I don't think we're doing much right now. That's all I was referencing. So, you didn't want to, I don't know if you were trying to put words in my mouth, but I did not say every evening. And I want to make sure anybody listening or watching understands that. And I get your point. I know we bring in people, and there's a cost to that, and the space issues and opening up the building and closing the building. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but let's do that now. That's all I'm saying. Let's do that now as best we can, and see who comes. That's what I was inferring. Thanks.
We don't have the numbers here with us today, but I know that maybe Fidel, you do. Chris has been sharing the numbers about the number of people coming into the center. Continues to grow. So people are enjoying the additional activities that have already been brought on board. And I think some of the stuff is starting, but to your point, Carla, why not? Let's try some other things we can do that now. There's no need to wait. Let's do it. So I think we're there. And I want to actually, Marilyn, if it's really quick, because I want to close this discussion.
It's really quick. I just want to apologize. I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I've heard people, not just you, talking about the nighttime thing, and just wanted to be clear that it isn't an all or nothing. And I apologize if you felt I was putting words in your mouth. I wasn't trying to.
No, thank you.
Thanks, folks. All right, so let's roll on. We are running about an hour behind. Whoops. Is Ben still with us? Ben Cares?
Wake up, Ben.
I'm here and awake.
Oh, excuse me. Before you start, Ben, Council or Recalc, do you want to adjourn?
Yeah, let me do that because, so Recalc's going to adjourn. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, John O'Neill, Mark Doxler,
Yes.
Nora Bucko.
Yes.
Michael Coltman, Montesini, John Parsons.
Yes.
John Sasso, yes. Recalc is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you very
Everyone's
much.
welcome to stay, but I want to make sure you have a chance to adjourn. All right, come on back.
Thanks.
For a very scintillating presentation, I'm sure. I'm just gonna pass out, actually, oh, thank you very much, appreciate that. And they are in the presentation, but I did adapt some of these, and we will get to this, are sort of the kind of core communication piece that I'm gonna be utilizing to let people know about the new format to the payment structure at Lots, and sort of some of the explanation behind, why are there kiosks being rolled out, and why is there a payment structure occurring for the downtown lots.
Hey, Ben, can I ask you a quick favor? Could you introduce yourself to everybody? I'm not sure, we probably know you, but you may not know everybody else.
Absolutely. Well, good evening. My name is Ben Cares. I am the Economic Development Director for the town of Reading. I am on month 3 in this position and very excited to be here. This is certainly going to be one of my first sort of major projects that is public facing and will rely on a lot of communication and a lot of support from the select board and town staff and anybody else that can get in my side of the ring on this. So
He's a student.
if we could go large screen on the presentation, that would be awesome. Thank you. So in general, this is a communication strategy for the businesses, residents, and potential users of these lots. For Upper Haven, which is the CVS parking lot right across the street, and then Brandy Court, which is behind Haven Street, next to the florist shop and sort of next to the depot area. Next slide, please. So what is changing in these lots? And so I've done my best in the first 3 months to sort of understand the process and the decision-making behind a lot of the downtown parking changes. And the lots and the kiosks and the new sort of payment structure are all a part of this sort of effort, which was led by town staff and supported by the Parking Advisory and Recommendations Committee. And this also, I believe this decision was voted in a majority town meeting vote as well. So there's been a history of political support and a lot of thought and effort that has gone into these improvements. Next slide, please. So I also understand that the Upper Haven lot in particular is likely going to see some improvements by way of potentially new line painting. This is just one of the options. I'll let the engineering department sort of work on that. I am working hand in hand with them just to make sure that it does feel like the right type of improvements here. Next slide, please. But today I'm talking about sort of the kiosk rollout, which are the very physical kiosks that folks can pay at in these lots. In addition to those, there will be the option to pay for parking utilizing an app on your smartphone, which is Pay by Phone. These are 4 potential locations. Tomorrow, I'll be walking the lots with the engineering department and Andrew McNichol to sort of see where we should place 2 kiosks per lot. So you see 4 potential areas here. There will be 2 kiosks per lot. We will try to make sure that they are visible and accessible and just make sure that there's an ease of use that sort of coincides with that installment. Next slide, please. I cited some potential locations for the Brandy Court lot as well. Again, the goal is to make sure that the kiosks are highly visible, and we can certainly think through additional ways, signage and what have you, to make sure people know that that those kiosks are available if they do not want to use a smartphone to pay by phone, which is a predominant and preferred method in general for other municipalities that have this type of payment structure in municipal lots. Next slide, please. So how has parking changed throughout the downtown following these park and staff recommendations? Next slide, please. This is, I won't go through this whole map, and I think folks have probably seen this before, but I did get the very, very recent update of this map from the Reading Police Department, and I've worked already very closely with them to understand sort of the regulations behind what the new lots will mean, but also just to understand what are some of the trends that we've seen in reformatting parking in the downtown. There seems to have been a focus on freeing up the municipal lots for patrons of businesses, which I think is important to ensure that we're getting turnover in those lots, especially as we see more foot traffic coming to the downtown and just trying to stimulate foot traffic to the downtown. We are looking at moving employee parking onto the roadways surrounding these lots. So for example, if you walk up and down Woburn Street, just adjacent to the lots, you'll see 2-hour parking or employee parking unlimited with a pass. There is a whole host of other types of parking for residents, 30-minute, 2-hour. There's also some new treatments for the commuter MBTA lots, and then residential permitting opportunities. Just given all of the development that we've seen in the downtown recently, I do think the changes are warranted. I do think that they reflect a lot of regional trends towards this type of downtown reformatted parking. Next slide, please. So the two lots, again, that we're talking about are the Upper Haven lot and the Brandy Court lot. Both are the two municipal lots that are squarely centered in our downtown and are clearly sort of the ones that we should be prioritizing for patrons of businesses and ensuring that that turnover occurs, which I think is sort of the overarching reason for the kiosks and the new payment structure in the lots. Next slide, please. I think a major dimension that we're going to need to deal with from the communications end, and of course, in my role as Economic Development Director, serving as a liaison between the business community and the town, is sort of where are employees going to park? It seems like, based on the trends that I've interpreted and been told, a fair amount of employees have enjoyed parking in the lots, sometimes unregulated, or sort of going out and moving their car every 2 hours or whatever the current duration allows for. And so there is a concern that I've already heard from visiting businesses, in my sort of first month of introducing myself about employee parking. I have been rest assured that the study shows that there is ample parking for employees. It's just not that it is right next to their place of work. Similarly, when folks can't park right outside the business that they're trying to enter to, it does introduce some consternation. I understand that it is change and that can be difficult, but there are plenty of places to park. Next slide, please. Everywhere highlighted in blue here is employee parking. I think in particular, the medical offices on Haven Street have recently enjoyed actually dedicated parking in the Brandy Court lot with signage, and they will need to find ways to park in these employee parking spaces highlighted in blue moving forward. So I have been assured that there is ample parking for employees, but of course, through my communications in sort of the pre-implementation of the kiosks, and then during those first couple of months that we roll them out, I will be listening to concerns, trying to address them accordingly, and directing folks to this map to let them know that there are places that they can park that are really representing maybe at maximum a 5-minute walk to their place of business. Next slide, please. So what is our outreach and communication plan to ensure a smooth transition? I think that is the core charge for me, is to ensure that it is as smooth of a transition as possible. Next slide, please. So this timeline is certainly subject to change only because we've confirmed a contract with IPS, which is the vendor of the kiosks. We are hoping that, given the sort of longer lead times with this equipment, we're hoping to have these installed in late June, early July. Again, that could change. If anything, it gives us a little bit more time to communicate with folks and get them used to the idea of this new payment structure in the lots. Fair amount of text up here. I'll sort of walk through it kind of from a bigger picture level here. But in April, I'd love to begin that notice to the public and businesses that this will be occurring. Again, this isn't like an open dialogue to be like, well, you could do it this way or that way. We've sort of already decided that this is how we're going to do it. We're going to implement these kiosks, we're going to introduce the Pay by Phone app. And so as a part of that, I will be in person walking around, flyering people's windshields with these types of 2-pagers that I've placed in front of you. We'll look at them in the presentation as well. But basically, they are frequently asked questions, and on the back of them is the new parking map. So for folks that have questions about residential parking or employee parking, they can sort of reference this document. And I will be doing that on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, leading up to the implementation of those kiosks. Additionally, mailing to the adjacent abutters and businesses, I think, will be a good faith effort. Again, this only reaches property owners, which I'm fully aware of when we do mailings from Town Hall. So I will also be going in person to drop off these informational flyers and have an open discussion about the changes to the lots with businesses in particular. We will leverage our what I've learned to be a very good social media base that we have around here. I will get the Chamber of Commerce to sort of help me out with some of that messaging and communication, as well as RCTV and Facebook, working with other town staff that are familiar with those types of communication channels. In May, again, just sort of continuing those communications, continuing to flyer. We'll do another round of mailings to abutters, and again, another sort of round of visits to businesses that are directly abutting these particular lots. And then in June, hopefully kiosks do get installed. Communications will continue. We will continue to sort of flyer people's cars. This is when hopefully the Reading Police Department will step in and start to do some regulation. We've discussed sort of here and there, you'll see in July, this 2-week grace period where basically people would get a warning ticket along with this pamphlet. I sort of questioned that today. I'm sort of like, well, would people just end up parking for free for those 2 weeks knowing that they had this grace period? So I'll be going back and forth with the Reading Police Department. We have a couple of meetings scheduled this week and later on to kind of talk about what's the best practice there, because that's really going to be helpful boots on the ground, is that person walking around, placing the flyers on people's cars, and eventually starting to issue these tickets. The other dimension of this is deciding how much that ticket will cost. I believe right now we have type A tickets for this type of offense, which I think are $20. Maybe they were recently raised to $25.
Not yet. They will be.
Excellent. It's coming back. So it'll be something like that in terms of a fee, a fine against those that are parking in these spaces without paying for them. And then we do propose in August, or sort of when it feels right, to have some type of public meeting to just let people voice their concerns. It's not to eradicate the new payment structures. Again, I think that there's been a good faith effort and studies done that this is a benefit to businesses in the downtown, and that it will help to sort of stimulate foot traffic, and that it aligns with our downtown and economic development goals. But we do want to understand if it's working well and if there's any kinks in sort of the user experience with the app or the kiosks or whatever, and give people a chance to sort of voice their concerns. Next slide, please. What will our outreach materials look like? I've talked about this a little bit already. Next slide. So in front of you, and I've tweaked it a little bit. Actually, Caitlin, thank you. This is the updated slide, perfect. We have some FAQs here. They kind of walk through what are the changes. One that's very important that people will want to know about is certainly how much is it going to cost. And so right now what it looks like is an hour free. And then if you surpass that hour, it is $1 per hour for 4 hours. And here is one of the nuances. If you are there for more than an hour, you pay for the first hour. Second, third, and fourth hour for $1 per hour. And then after that, it's 4 hours. It's $5 per hour after 4 hours. It says it very succinctly on that, better than I just stated it. But it is sort of unlimited if you do want to pay for a very long amount of time. Again, this is only for certain hours of the day. I believe right now the lots are active from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 8 p.m.
I think 4 p.m.
We will sort that out with the police department and update this as well, but it will be open free for parking for whoever needs to use it after those hours of operation. Additionally, so we talk about sort of how the changes will help, how they align with some of the goals that we have here. Where should employees and business owners park? We've talked about that. How will it be enforced? Of course, the Reading Police Department will enforce it. What happens if I get a ticket? Hopefully, through this modernization, we will be transitioning to being able to pay tickets online instead of having to go to the Reading Police Department, which I think is a nice improvement. Who decided to make these changes? Of course, it was the town, voted by town meeting, the park committee, and then just sort of a disclaimer about handicap spots. This does not affect handicap placards. You can park for free anywhere in town with a handicap placard. And then my contact information and email will be on these pamphlets. I will be taking the brunt of the line of questioning from the business community and residents, and I am happy to do so. Next slide, please. Just showing that on the back of this, there will be the updated 2022 downtown parking amendment. Next slide, please. Recapping on the communications plan. Next slide. Again, flyering of the informational document. I think that's really important. I think it's good to kind of get those FAQs answered, have that in hand for folks, the mailing to abutting businesses, and then this sort of in-person work that I'm committing to with communication networks in town hall, as well as going out to the businesses in particular, and any of those sort of residential establishments as well, to let them know about these changes that are oncoming. And I think the next slide is questions and answers. So, any questions?
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Any questions, folks? Brett?
Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Ben, for that. I will say I do like the multi-month approach that you're taking on this, even after the kiosks are installed, continuing to communicate with the public. So it's good to see something that is really impacting a lot of businesses over there. You having this entire plan laid out in perfect form, where if I want to question you, you're not doing enough. You have it all laid out here, and you're going to continue to do it. Couple questions. The EV charger thing that you put on the map, why is that there?
So I took that as a conceptual drawing of the potential improvements for the lot. I don't know what's confirmed and what's not. I just used it for the parking kiosk locations. That was assembled by Beta, which is our consultant for the potential improvements to those lots. I don't know what they're planning to do with EV rollouts there. But if you do have a specific question, maybe we could answer it either here, or I can circle back with folks and get that answered for you.
Yeah, it's more of, I know you've only been here for 3 months, so this is going to predate you, but I regret 2 decisions that I've made on this board. And one is approving the charger outside of Christopher's Restaurant. Because
sit there all day.
Some of the people have, based on the usage that's there, but that is a significant parking area that is always taken up, that people are utilizing. And, when you drive by and see nobody there, and then people are circling the block, like the CVS lot, forget about it. You're not going to be able to do any of this over there. The thing's jammed 24/7.
Yeah.
So to take Christopher's and then build it upon into CVS, forget about it. I do like that, because I was going to ask you about the kiosk location things as well. I saw like 4 of them on there, and I'm like, I know we approved 2 in each lot, so it's good to see that you're looking at different spots. I do like the bookending thing on the CVS lot there, because it's going to satisfy whether or not you're going in this way or that way, and people going into CVS, I would like to think that it's brief for them. The frequently asked questions say, how do I pay for parking? You don't mention cash or credit. Is that an option? Because it should have been.
I believe
So the kiosks,
allow for cash and credit. I can
Oh,
ask.
so this is only referencing the ticket, not the actual kiosks themselves.
So I can certainly add that to it for sure, to say at kiosks, you can pay. Well, I think it's implied that if you pay by your phone, it's sort of virtual payments, right? You can use your card. But at the kiosks, I think it is important to mention that cash is an option. And I will confirm that with IPS. We have a meeting with them tomorrow.
Okay.
And I will incorporate it to the FAQs.
And I know we're going to discuss the parking ticket scenario, but I brought this up at Park as well, that the parking rate of $1 an hour, and then over 4 hours is $5 an hour. So when you scale that out, that is $24 for parking the entire day. And how much is a ticket?
it is 20 right now, but
Increasing.
there's a proposal in front of you to increase that
So why not just-
Because, exactly, nobody's going to do anything.
But if you recall, right, the combined with that proposal is the ability for Reading Police to issue multiple tickets in one day.
As long as it's, well,
As long as it's advertised and voted by the board.
Correct.
Do you think it should be more?
Listen, I just want people, the way that I wanted it, and it's just me, you know, is my opinion, is the issue is the employees in over 4 hours. I'm including myself in the employee thing because I'm not perfect all the time.
Right.
So, yes, I'm currently within all the guidelines that are there. I am taking full advantage, depending on the scenarios. But yes, like it just doesn't, we want people to move out of the lots so we have the turnover, so people can, yeah. So we just, that's what we
$25
want.
Times 5 gets you up to the annual fee for an employee parking. Right?
The persons, the people that are parking there made $25 an hour by the time you finish that sentence.
I think,
So,
folks, can we actually hang on to this argument because we still need at another meeting to have a discussion about the fees and how it's going to get implemented. And I think we're kind of in that territory here.
Sounds good.
and I think, let me check my notes. No, the other big thing I saw that you had social media, et cetera, like, you know, I think a video would be helpful, obviously. Just, maybe you can use it. You know who, I'll give you, you should talk to Tom at the trophy store. He will love to demo the kiosk with you. And tell him I said that.
I would watch an excellent video.
Yes, you and Tom.
Yeah, love that.
I'll help you out. But thank you, Ben. It was, you know, it's good seeing this and once again, the goal, the town is not getting rich off this. It's mainly to just control the parking to let the businesses thrive. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else from the board? Jack?
Yeah, Mark, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, we go to the board first. I'll call up.
Okay, thank you. I think the FAQ does a good job at kind of bringing the reader up to speed on the history of this and of the input from the park, from town meeting, the enforcement from the police department. I think maybe just taking a look at that yellow language on the first question on the left, just to be really clear that, you know, hours 1 through 4, $1 an hour, you know, that's really the big takeaway. I wish you Godspeed on this process. So thank you for taking this on. Yeah.
Is there a quick question in the room about this process? Is that what I overheard? Oh, sorry, Karen. I see your
Okay,
hand
no,
up first.
no worries, thanks. You might want to take social media pictures with every business you speak to, so in case there's some that like feel like they weren't spoken to, you know, all in good fun. And I'll be looking for you strolling up and down Haven Street. Sounds like you're gonna be in great shape for next year's marathon. I'm interested in seeing, what I've noticed is that High Street and Vine Street, it's not used, even though it's noted that it should be already 2-hour employee parking. So I guess I'm gonna be really curious to start driving by there after you implement this to see if you see the migration, because that was the goal. All right, thank you.
Okay, great. And I'm sorry, was there a quick question in the room about the communication plan?
Yes,
Yes,
I just wanted
Please,
come on up.
could you come forward, please, to the podium?
Cheryl Lestrade, 22 Gold Street. I just wanted to know that in the whole aspects of the changing in parking, the lot in front of the CVS area, instead of continuing it to be 2-hour parking for most of those spots, why we can't bring it down to 15-minute parking? Because if people are utilizing those areas for 2 hours, they're not going to utilize the designated parking spots. And then those people who are just running into CVS or those businesses right there, the trophy store or whatever, to grab something and go, whether it's their prescription or a trophy, that a plaque that they ordered, is gonna have to go around and park in the designated parking spots as opposed to an in and out in the front lot. Which means that those people who are parking free for 2 hours in the front instead of 15 minutes to run in and out are utilizing 2-hour parking.
So you're talking, so just to be clear, you're talking about the parking right in front of CVS, like when we're looking at Cafe Nero,
The
right?
cobblestone, the
Okay,
cobblestone.
so you're saying there's a 2-hour parking format there.
Yes.
and just reiterate what the issue is.
I think that's out of the scope of what we're.
Can we make
I
it
think we're gonna
15?
take that off our folks.
That's something that would need to go to sort of PTTTF, and so that could be something that you'd like to bring up to them, but I'm just here to talk about just the lots.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, thank you, Ben.
I'll see you
Bill
soon.
Sullivan still with us?
Yeah. Town Forest is never coming to see us again. This is it, enjoy it.
Good morning, Bill. I mean, good evening.
I'm Bill Sullivan, I'm the chair of the Town Forest Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to come in to speak with you. Could we could advance the slides? That would be great.
Yes, 1 second, it's coming up.
Thanks, Caitlin.
And then you can go right to the second slide. It's just okay, thank you. So these are the items that I want to just discuss with you briefly, kind of give you an update on what's been happening in the town forest, to report on the progress that we're making with the dead tree removal and the invasive plant control. And then to give you an update on the ARPA funds that you all approved for us for $100,000. I'm very grateful for. There's another item that's issue that's come up is in the town is, to see if we need to change our policy on how we can reduce the conflicts that are happening between residents and some of the commercial dog walkers that have large numbers of dogs on the leash. So that's been kind of simmering, and it's still ongoing. Next slide, please. So that kind of picture tells it all. There are a lot of dead trees in the town forest, fewer now, but they're still there. The green trees you see are white pines, and the dead trees are red pines. And we're also dealing with invasive plants. Next slide, please. So the red pines, they're a more northern species, not native to this area. And so, as the climate has changed, the red pines are getting stressed by, and when they get stressed, then they're more vulnerable to fungus and insects and things. So it's important that we remove them to eliminate that danger from either falling or fires. Next slide, please. So the areas in orange are, so it's not everywhere in the town forest. There are kind of pockets of them. And so again, we're making progress, but there's still more work to be done. Next slide, please. So work to date, there have been 3 phases of dead tree removal. The first was in 2020, 4.5 acres, $28,000. Second phase, another 4.5 acres, $22,000. And the third phase last November was $36,000, which we used part of the ARPA funds that you all. During phase 2 and phase 3, we applied for and received $10,000 grants from Department of Conservation and Recreation. And so that then helped offset town funds for the ARPA funds. And these projects were bid and managed by our Reading DPW. Next slide, please. So the invasive plants, there have been a number of invasive plants that have gotten into the town forest. A lot of them were from, people used in landscaping, but they've gotten into the town forest. Those are buckthorn, Japanese knotweed, tree of heaven, black swallowwort. They're pretty firmly established. So, the idea is if we don't control them now, then we will, they will continue to crowd out the native plants in the town forest. Also, they're in the compost area, which kind of makes sense, right? Because a lot of people had these invasives in their yard, they cut them down, bring them to the compost, now their seeds are spreading. So we need to do something about that too. Next slide, please. So the work to date primarily has been volunteer work on buckthorn pulling by scouts, town residents, and others such as Amazon Robotics. We did a first phase of a pilot buckthorn treatment by Parterre Ecological in last June, at a cost of $9,500. Why it's important to bring professional certified applicators in. You can pull the small buckthorn, but anything larger than 1 inch, you have to cut it and then dab it with an herbicide. It's called cut and dab method. Also, some of the other invasives, like for example, the Japanese knobweed, is impossible to remove any other way but by herbicide application. It is so persistent, it's a bear. So, next slide, please. I'm sorry, could you go back one? I wanted to talk about the invasive plant inventory and management plan. Basically, it's the roadmap. It identifies where the plants are and then what method we need to use to get them under control. And again, whether it's the cut and dab or pulling or there are other methods too. We're using that going forward to develop the bid documents or bidding out this work that must be done by certified applicators. Next slide, please. So this is a map from that inventory plan. It shows the kind of the beige areas where the invasives are located. And most of them are along the roads, the roads and the trails. That's where they tend to congregate. So it's manageable. We can get our arms around it now. So that's what we're trying to do. Next slide, please. So in terms of the $100,000 in ARPA funds that was authorized by you all, to date, we've spent $36,000 on the dead tree invasive balance is about $64,000. The next phase of the invasive plant control, which will be bid, will use up essentially the rest of that money. So, but that's not going to be the end of it, end of the story. There will be additional phases for the dead tree removal and for invasive control, beyond the authorized ARPA funds. We're estimating for the next phase of dead tree removal will be about $40,000. That should be done in FY24. Phase 3 of the invasive plant control is about $70,000. And so that would be in FY25. We will be seeking grants to as much as we can to minimize the impact on the town. Next slide, please. So the other issue I mentioned is that we're continuing to get complaints about conflicts between residents and commercial walkers in the town forest with large numbers of dogs, which is currently allowed by the bylaw. The bylaw says that you can bring a dog into the town forest off leash as long as it's under voice control. But why it's kind of that I'm not sure that it envisioned having 8 off leash dogs. I mean, that creates some concern when people come across it. And a recent Facebook post by one commercial dog walker said, "I'm a dog walker there. I bring in 8 off leash and they are all under voice control. There are a lot of people on the trail who are very mean and will treat you this way. I deal with it every day. Just do your own thing and ignore them." It was addressed to another commercial dog walker. So it kind of made me think. I've been going to the town forest for 30 years, and I can't say I've ever met anybody that's mean. So what is it? It kind of begs the question, what's causing these conflicts between the commercial dog walkers and the residents? And is it, that the dogs, are they not under voice control? Are they, do members feel that they're, unsafe around, these large groups of unleashed dogs, and the safety concerns being ignored? So because of the bylaw, the police are limited in terms of what they can do. They can't go out and say, you have to get these 8 dogs under control or on leash, because the bylaw doesn't require that they be on leash, even that many dogs. So what the town forest committee is doing is looking at what are other towns doing? How do they handle this situation? Do we need to change our policies to make it so that people will be more comfortable with it? Next slide, please. So then in summary, we've moved dead trees from 13.8 acres to date. We're continuing to replant, and the process for invasive plant control is going to continue. It will need to continue beyond 2023. And as I said, we will be looking at what other towns do to see what we can do to reduce these negative interactions between residents and commercial properties. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. So just folks, I'm the liaison to the Town Forest Committee. This has come up on a few occasions, as Bill mentioned, and I think that the suggestion to explore what other communities are doing, what happens in DCR lands, a lot of other places, different towns deal with it in a lot of different ways, including licensing handlers on an annual basis, limiting certain things, designating areas. But I don't think we know enough to be able to make a recommendation yet. However, it is a recurring problem, and so I think we need to address it at some point. And so, Bill brought it forward in terms of kind of here are the next steps that are going on. And at some point, I think it'll come, in front of the board, specific to a bylaw, meaning, it's going to have to go to town meeting, go through bylaw committee if there's going to be any change to it. And then it also introduces some other questions potentially also in terms of a dog park or other areas where, dogs may be allowed to go. So the point tonight was not to, open this up and turn this into a grand discussion, but rather to talk about it's an issue, it's being explored, and it's going to come back to us to kind of figure out where to take it next. So any questions or comments, folks?
I have a quick question. Are you sure?
You're good.
Actually, it's for Fidel. So surprise you. Great presentation. So I'm just looking at the additional funding they're gonna be looking for, and we haven't seen any requests for earmarks, and our friend Brad Jones is a great fan of open space, and I don't know what your thoughts were. Might we consider maybe targeting this for an earmark request, part of this?
Sure.
Maybe what?
Carrie, you're thinking for the invasives and trees, or
Yes,
which one?
yeah, just both,
Okay.
both. Might as well ask for everything, see what we get. I was
Yeah,
just thinking
'cause
that,
otherwise-
go ahead.
Otherwise, I think what's been happening aside from ARPA funds is this has to come in front of town meeting, and it's, town funds to kind of maintain this beautiful green space. So I think the earmarks are a great idea. Sorry, Carl.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to address the same concerns. I agree. This is, thank you for this. Is a lot of work. This was very helpful, and over the past year and a half, with the buckthorn and the dead trees, we've been hearing a lot about this. But hopefully, our state delegation and maybe federal can get you some monies. But I think I agree with Mark that this should come before town meeting in November to request funds to not delay any of this, because the more it spirals out of control. I saw on one slide, I don't know if the phases were backwards, but you had 3 and 4, wrong.
One's a tree, one's.
Well, okay, so I think it's great work, and I don't have a dog. I'm not an avid user of the town forest myself, but I know it's treasured in the town and highly used. So I applaud all your efforts. I know between Trails and you guys, you do a lot of great work. So hopefully we can get some money.
Chris.
Thanks, Mark. So in terms of the spreading, it does make sense to deal with it now, because otherwise it's going to spread, because that's what spreading is. It just keeps spreading. So, so you had on there about the phase 3 invasive. Is there a phase 4?
Not funded. Phase 3 is funded. But, no, sorry.
For the invasives?
For the invasives. So the thing, it depends on the invasive. Like, for example, the Japanese knotweed, because it's so persistent, you have to hit it 3 to 5 years at a much lesser scale. So the first year, you have to go in, cut it, and then come back in September and dab it. And it'll get around 60 to 80% kill. And so there will be, but it diminishes after that. The buckthorn, are we ever going to be able to get rid of every bit of it? Probably not. But to be able to get the lion's share, and that's what these first 2 phases will do. The first one's a small one. This next one, and then the one after that was shown as 70,000. That will be the lion's share. There will definitely be, and I don't want to, make it, lead you on to believe that this is it and then it's done. There will be some need for additional monies, but it'll be much less on the out years.
And then are people still bringing the stuff into the depot stuff over there and whatnot, and it's just going to be never ending? Or are we prohibiting this from being disposed of? Or if that's how it got here in the first place and people could just keep doing it, then aren't we going to be dealing with phase 20 in 10 years from now?
We have in fact, talked about that in meetings and how do we handle it? We talked about maybe we could set up a big roll-off that people could take, put invasive plants in and then take that to the incinerator. That's definitely something that we.
Yeah, otherwise, we're just gonna just keep compounding this issue. And I won't get into the bylaw thing other than mentioning you can't control 8 of anything verbally. Doesn't matter. Kids at Disney World, forget about it. Like, you can't control 8 of anything verbally. That's my opinion. But thank you, though.
Thanks. Any other questions, folks? We good?
Thank you. Thank you.
Bill, thanks for your great work, Bill.
Thanks for waiting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Fidel, you want to declare some surplus property?
Yes, sir. Let's do this quick. You're good. No, we're good.
Oh, sorry, Chris, I didn't see you there.
That's okay. Yeah. You can go home.
Doctor is here.
So in front of you, there's two surplus forms that are in the packet. We separated them because they will be potentially going to two separate vendors at 2 different times. Essentially, it is the handguns that are getting replaced. It is going out to bid at the moment. It is on our website. Responses are due at the end of the month, and the intent is to essentially the same entity that we buy from. We are going to trade in the old handguns. I say the ammunitions are different because there's a co-op in place where we get ammunition from. But again, it is following up on what town meeting approved in November.
And Fidel, I thought the use of these used handguns is going to be for parts. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, so the we wrote up the bid so that the same company that we are buying from has to take them. There is only one certified dealer in the Northeast, so they've assured us that these guns will be handled appropriately, and that most likely they will use them for parts.
Board members, questions?
None.
No,
Do we have a motion? Oh, sorry.
no questions in here, so, Mark.
I got 2 separate ones, Mark.
Okay, far away. Far in the front.
Yep, move to declare the 37 Glock handguns as presented as surplus property.
Is there a second? Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? All right, we're gonna have to do everything as roll call. So why don't I'll go around the room as I see you. So Jackie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
and Mark, yes. Second motion, please.
Move to declare the ammunition as presented as surplus property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carlo. Any discussion on this one? None appearing. We'll take a roll call again. Jackie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Mark, yes. We're 5-0 on both. Next on the agenda, Affordable Housing Trust Board. Jackie, do you want to lead this one?
I can give some background, if that's helpful, just to how we got here. Basically, we are, let me pull up my notes. So back in September, this board recommended a town meeting warrant article converting 400,000 that was sitting in essentially an outdated, in terms of state law, housing fund that simply rolled over every year to an affordable housing trust fund as designated by the state back in 2005. This 2005 version allows municipalities to collect funds for affordable housing, segregate them into a municipal or from the municipal budget and use the funds to either create or preserve the affordable housing. So town meeting approved the warrant article back in November. And then in February, last month, as is required, the Attorney General approved our warrant article and authorized the transition of the $400,000 into an affordable housing, a statutorily authorized affordable housing trust fund. And so on the same track as that, there have been a number of discussions led by town staff, some of our town's housing stakeholders, including the Housing Authority Executive Director and some members of the Housing Authority Board. Frankly, those efforts, it seems to me, have been focused almost exclusively on developing Oakland Road. We had a public forum about that last summer. And I believe that a number of those stakeholders are very interested in that parcel. So that's kind of the background on how we got to where we are now. And I can speak a little later about some of what I learned from the MMA's Affordable Housing Trust Fund webinar. I think it's helpful to understand what we can do with this and maybe look to some peer communities because we're somewhat unique. And the fact that we now are about to start this trust fund committee, but we do not have CPA. And so I think there are a couple of other communities that are in that situation and have done some things that we can consider.
So just to clarify, Jackie, CPA is a funding mechanism for many of those communities, is that right? The Community Preservation Act is used to fund this?
I don't know if it's a funding act for many of the communities, but I know that one of the 4 stated purposes of CPA funds in towns that have CPA is housing. I believe the other 3 are recreation, historical preservation, and open space.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so for tonight, town meeting approved the formation of the structure of a new affordable housing trust board to be comprised of 1 select board member and then additional community members. And I think there's a requirement that one has to live in a housing authority property. Is that, am I correct on that one?
So I think in the packet, let's see. That's right. We have that requirement in our town meeting warrant from last November. And then if I remember correctly, when we approved this warrant back in September, we added in some language explaining that we wanted to see other appointment committee or appointments from people who have experience with things like housing, development, land use and zoning, and the law. It's not that they have to be, but it's, it's something that we preferred. I don't know.
And this is in the part that's in the packet, 3.3.7.2.
Yeah. So we say in 3372, we say 3 other members. So we'll have 1 member appointed by the select board, 1 who is a member of the Reading Housing Authority, and 3 other members, including, to the extent possible, people who have a background in affordable housing, finance, law, including land use and zoning, real estate, or real estate development, and that 1 of those 3 should be a resident in affordable housing for at least 1 year.
So board members, any questions, comments? Should we move? Oh, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, typically I would say right before election, we shouldn't be appointing anybody, but it seems as if Jackie has been dealing with this the entire time, and I think that she would do well in this. So I'm not sure if anyone's nominating her or she's nominating herself, but I'm fine with Jackie continuing what she's been doing.
Thank you.
Awesome. I agree with you, Chris. I think that Jackie is exactly the right person for this. I will nominate Jackie for the select board nominee to the Affordable Housing Trust Board.
Second.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I have been active in this. And like I said, I'm particularly interested in learning how we can use this Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board in our somewhat unique situation. So for example, Medfield, similar town, has an Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, does not have Community Preservation Act. And so they used their trust fund to issue a municipal bond. So they took more of a financing that instead of a direct development role. You know, I've said before, I'll say again, I'm concerned about the way that the Oakland Road process is rolling out, and I look forward to more opportunities for the public to weigh in on that. And I'm hopeful that this board can work with the Housing Authority and with staff on kind of looking at the whole picture, whether that includes financing, renovating, you know, or rehabbing parcels and addressing the issue, but doing so in a way that doing so in a way that is fitting into neighborhood contexts.
Awesome. Are there any other candidates? Anybody want to nominate anybody else as a potential person for this role from the select board? I don't see anybody. Okay, so we have a nomination and a second. Why don't we take a roll call vote on what's going on here as I see you on the screen. So Jackie?
Yes. Thank you.
That was a hesitation.
Yes.
Chris?
Yes, without hesitation, Mark.
Carlo?
Yes.
And Mark, yes. Congratulations, Jackie. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Have a cupcake.
So the other part that we spoke about was now to go out and talk about how to advertise to find the other members, right? So obviously we could talk to the Housing Authority and ask them to appoint somebody, but it's the three other members that we need to discuss. How do we want to do this? I assume that it's one of our boards, right? So it should go through the VASC process. And so I think what we need to do is just figure out how do we want to advertise it clearly. How do we want to talk to people about it, make sure they know about it, encourage folks who have these backgrounds that we talked about that actually were approved by town meeting to want to apply for this role. Anybody want to offer some thoughts? Karen?
Yeah, no, that sounds great, and maybe since you started doing the research, if you provide a couple links to others that seem to be up and functioning, that might be helpful for people wondering what the heck Housing Authority could, this trust could do.
Yeah, I can work with staff to provide the links for the Housing Authority Trust Fund background so that folks who are interested know kind of what they're getting into. I do think that we made some good progress over the past month or so on VASC appointments, but I think it's also, in a more general sense, worth calling out other VASC appointments, or other vacancies, I should say, because there still are many, and including this one in that list.
So I wonder if we could do that, perhaps, that I'll ask Jane to create a little bit of a feature.
Absolutely.
This is a test case.
Yep.
To put out maybe on the homepage or somewhere very, very significant, so it's easy to see and see. And I guess we need to talk it around as well, talk to folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other thoughts on this one?
I think it's a good first step, yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's do, okay, future agenda. So in the packet, a little bit of kind of what's, excuse me. Deep into the agenda. Any other things to put into April?
Yeah, well, Mark, I don't know about April, but we've talked several times about starting the annual discussion with Reading Ice Arena in June. So I don't know if we want to go ahead and put it on a June meeting or put in the
Sure, why
list.
not?
All
Let's do
right,
that.
there's one on the 6th, so that might be good since holidays start.
Any other items, folks?
Yeah, just at some point, talk about exploring, I guess, town council.
Where would you like to see it, timing wise?
I'll see. April 18th is kind of full, so and then we have town meeting, so maybe in May.
Sounds good. Why don't we put it, I was gonna say the first one right after the election maybe is not the right one, so yeah, so I think May sounds good. Maybe tuck it into May 9th for now.
Yeah, and I think it's probably just not there yet, but I think on 18th, you know, after, I don't know what order it would go to, but we need reorganization of the board. Is one of the first items, obviously.
Sure, that is the first item, correct.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll get added.
Yep, that's the very top.
And then we should
Anything
definitely have a conversation about starting the process for the forest about the dogs. And to me, that was a good commercial for a dog park.
So I think that that's part of a solution, but there are a lot of pieces that we need to work through on that too.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Okay,
Mark,
Jackie, sorry.
I think maybe a liaison report, not right away, but maybe like mid-year, before the end of the summer from CPDC, if that's something we typically get from them. I think they may have come last fall, but I see them as a pretty significant board and committee that's not listed in our liaison.
Sounds like a great idea. Do you want to tuck that into, excuse me, one of the May meetings?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great, let's do that. Anything else? Looking good. All right, let's take a look at minutes. Almost, I see Jenny. Hello, Jenny. Almost there. I had a couple of suggestions. I apologize, I didn't get them in timely to change them, but I did get them in. I apologize, I'm looking left. I'm running on 2 computers and 3 screens. Sorry.
I can share your edits, Mark, if you want. Those are the only ones I received.
Please, that'd be great.
So I briefly looked through them. I think they're down the end.
I corrected the spelling on Harmon at one point. I just didn't jump over there later on.
Oh, did I miss that?
It's right at the beginning. Just to drop down further.
Oh, yeah, right here. Okay.
All right, I just added the end to Harmon. Okay, and then now, let's see. So Chris, on the comment regarding 59 Middlesex Avenue,
Yep.
there's no kind of context to it in the minutes, and so I thought if it was going to be there, maybe we try something kind of like this. Sorry, I can't read my whole note there.
I can't either. Other than kind of limbo.
Yeah, kind of, okay, suggested, Haley brought up the town's dealings on 59 Middlesex Avenue, feels that it was not a win for the town and it never should have gone that far.
I think
So
that's,
basically, the context is just saying, dealings on 59 Middlesex Avenue.
yeah, I mean, I think I would just add to that I wasn't going to bring it up because Ivrea, I mentioned that at the meeting, that Ivrea wasn't involved at the beginning of that. So I didn't think it was fair to give any pro or con against Ivrea on that because it wasn't relevant. So I'm not sure how you can put all that in there, but that's what I said, that I wasn't gonna bring it up for her.
But what makes you think she wasn't involved? Because I was involved for the role. Ivrea, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Carla, correct me if I'm wrong. We had multiple attorneys coming in. That was a pretty complex situation, and you can ask for the minutes probably. But Ray Miaris had stepped away last fall. It was Ivrea from beginning to end.
So it was Ivrea managing the MIAA
Yeah,
folks.
and bringing in experts as needed. Is that what you're thinking about?
So who was the attorney at the meeting for 59 Middlesex? Who was the
It
attorney?
was a lot of people.
It
It was the MIA or.
But that's what I'm saying, like, who was the attorney actually at that meeting with all the residents that were there? If Ivrea was at that meeting, then
What
you are
meeting?
correct.
I thought we were
At the
talking.
at the library?
At the library,
Well, that was a-
that's what I'm talking about. That's the community meeting at the library, was Ivrea there? either yes or no. And if she
Okay.
wasn't, then that's what
I
I'm
thought you
going
were
with.
specifically talking about the 2021 dealings with 59 Middlesex, not like.
No, I wasn't privy to that. I'm only privy
Right,
to
so
what
that's why I
was
was kind of
public.
confused. All
Yeah,
right,
I'm confused too. Sorry, I thought it was what you said, Karen. I thought it was related to our dealings with 59 Middlesex.
No, it's only what obviously I don't know if we can still reveal or whatever the heck, because I approved meeting minutes from 59 Middlesex at one of these prior board meetings.
I see.
So what
So I don't think she was there. I don't think she was involved in that.
that's what I was only going off what was public that anybody who would watch the meeting would know. That's what I was going off.
so, yeah, I thought you were talking about our legal, there was no legal issue then, council was just there. But when the select board started having legal issues and going into, executive session wrestles, those were managed by Ivrea, that's how you, yeah. Okay, so that's what I thought you were talking about, I was very
Yeah,
confused.
that's why I didn't want to bring it up.
How do you think we should put it in here?
I said what I said, so, I mean, I'm fine with what you put in there, that I didn't want to bring it up because I don't believe that she was involved in the beginning with 59 Middlesex, and it wasn't warranted, or whatever I said, something around those terms. But I only brought it up because Karen brought it up. But I don't know how you want to put that in there too, or whatever. Is it mentioned that she brought it up? Otherwise, this doesn't make sense.
It's not, it's not mentioned.
Yeah, I did say it, that Karen mentioned it.
Oh,
which
okay.
is why I put it in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so as long as it's noted, because I was responding to Karen's comment about it.
Yeah, but you should clarify, because so my comment, I was specifically referring to our dealings with Ivrea and helping us through a difficult 59 Middlesex situation. So we had a disconnect clearly.
Yeah.
But let's be clear about what we were both referring to, and you can say, thinking back to, I don't know what you want to say, I don't know how you do this, but like, it's.
I was going with the
Certainly
beginning.
sounded like you were trying to let me, and I'm like, why is he doing that? I
I
don't
was
get it.
going to the beginning of 59 Middlesex, where it all began, just like the beginning of the menorah, just like the beginning of everything else. That's where I was beginning, right at the beginning. So I don't know what you want to do, Mark. Whatever you want to put up there, kind of scenario.
I'm just struggling.
I mean,
What if we just said that does not agree? How about Haley expressed some concerns about 59 Middlesex Ave.
Well,
yeah,
I
why
still
don't you
want
just
it.
stick to your concerns about,
I still want it there that I don't agree with the statement made previously. I mean, that's what I said.
But
Yes, so the problem is that there was not miscommunication. The 59 Middlesex and the suit that was brought, I don't think is what you were referring to.
and I wasn't referring to it, so why would you be arguing with me, right?
Well, anything with Middlesex in general is what I was bringing up, and I was going for the beginning of Middlesex. And I made the comment to Mark saying that if I was there, Mark, you know exactly what I would have done. So that's why.
What if we said that Haley expressed concerns about the handling of 59 Middlesex Avenue?
And that I feel that it wasn't a win for the town.
Then it wasn't.
That's what you said, I heard you say
Yeah.
that.
You look right?
Yes.
Awesome. Is there anything below Caitlin that I sent back? And let's see. Oh, yes, there is. Sorry. Oh, MWRA assessment is the problem. Just to clarify, sorry, I changed it to Dr. Note, the MWRA assessment is the problem when it's hurting our rates. The board reiterated a desire to continue discussing what can be done about that. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
One last thing.
Oh, so the one thing that I had requested, was just requested training of staff be raised in importance as a key goal for the year.
Okay.
Any other suggestions, changes, amendments?
I sent over Caitlin something just now. It's just to add the clarity to the end of a sentence. So if she just wants to bring it up, it's just the end of it.
Let's see.
So that is going to end up being on page 2, directly under town council discussion, is that paragraph I gave you, Caitlin.
Okay. Oh, you want this to go here?
No, what I just, no, under Haley feels there's no review process for town council. Like I copy pasted that whole statement, but it's only the last like 10 words that has to go up. Yes. So all I added was adding clarity where I said we spent $550 before the vote and $9,000 after. So that's what I'm adding.
So Chris, you want to delete what's in black and just keep the new?
Yeah, I mean, all I did was add with 550 spent before the vote, 9,000 afterwards. That's all I'm adding.
That's what you said. So I'm fine with that.
And that's all.
Everybody else good with that?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion, please, Chris.
Yes, move to approve the meeting minutes for March 7, 2023 as amended.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? Not appearing. Let's take a vote as I see you in the room. Jackie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
And Mark, yes. Okay, we are ready. So Chris, do you have a motion? Do you have the latest one, Fidel, that you sent over?
Yes, sir.
I just come back and open.
Yep.
Please, go for it.
Move to enter executive session under purpose 6 to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of 1700 Street as the chair declares that an open meeting could have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the body, to invite town council Janie Merrill, town manager Fidel Maltez, and executive assistant Caitlin Nasella to attend the executive session and not to reconvene in open session.
There's a second.
Second.
Thanks, Carl. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Jackie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
And Mark, yes. So we are moving now to executive session. So someone let Rob